Hey, I'm Mr. Ghost. If you love true horror stories, consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow. The stories you'll hear are shared by our audience from Reddit, and to keep their original essence, I read them exactly as they were written. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Also, check the timestamps in the comments for story titles and easy navigation. Now, let's dive into the darkness. I booked an Airbnb for a holiday in Hawaii. There are strange rules to follow. I never thought a simple vacation could go so wrong. In fact, when I planned this trip, I imagined nothing but peace. 2 nights away from the noise of everyday life, a chance to reset. I wasn't looking for adventure, and I definitely wasn't looking for trouble. But trouble has a way of finding you, especially when you least expect it. I booked an Airbnb in Hawaii, a quiet little house nestled deep in the jungle. Nothing fancy, just a simple retreat surrounded by nature. The listing had beautiful photos, warm lighting, wooden interiors, lush greenery outside the windows. It looked perfect, cozy, secluded, exactly what I needed. The host, a woman named Leilani, seemed friendly in her messages. She had tons of positive reviews, guests praising her hospitality and the house's charm. It all felt safe, normal. I needed this escape, a break from everything. I had no idea that stepping into that house would be stepping into something I wasn't prepared for. The first sign that something was off came before I even arrived. I received an email with the subject line, "Important rules for your stay must read." At first I barely glanced at it. Every Airbnb has rules: don't smoke, don't throw parties, clean up after yourself. I assumed this would be the same. But as I scrolled, my casual attitude faded. The list was long, strangely long, and some of the rules made no sense. Lock all doors at 9 p.m. sharp. Do not wait a second longer. If you hear any tapping or knocking between midnight and 3 a.m., do not answer. Do not open the door. Do not look out the window. If you wake up to any sensation of being watched, do not move. Wait until you no longer feel it. Do not turn on the porch light after sunset. If you find any object in the house that wasn't there when you arrived, do not touch it. Do not look directly at the carving. Email us immediately. Before leaving, sprinkle salt at the 4 corners of the house, and never look back when you go. I stared at the list, rereading certain lines, trying to make sense of them. At first, I laughed. Maybe it was a joke? A weird local superstition? Some kind of tradition? The house was deep in the jungle, so maybe Leilani had reasons for these rules. Something about wildlife, burglars, or just keeping the place in order. It felt strange, sure, but harmless. I figured I'd follow them, if only out of respect. Besides, what was the worst that could happen? But then the night began, and everything changed. I arrived in the late afternoon, and the moment I stepped out of the car, I felt the quiet, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that makes you hesitate. Still, the house was beautiful, even more so than the pictures had shown. Wooden beams stretched across the ceiling. The open windows let in a warm breeze, and beyond them, the jungle whispered with the rustling of leaves. The air was thick with humidity, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. It was the kind of place that should have made me feel at ease, and at first it did. I unpacked slowly, placing my bag near the bed, my toiletries in the bathroom, my phone on the nightstand. Every movement felt strangely heavy, as if I was sinking into the house's stillness. For a while, I just stood in the center of the room, absorbing it. The weight of silence, the weight of being alone. It was different from the usual solitude I craved. It wasn't peace, it was something else. Then, as the sun began to dip beyond the trees, the feeling grew stronger. The air inside the house felt different, thicker, as if the walls themselves were pressing in, waiting. I glanced at the clock. 8:45 p.m. The rule came back to me suddenly, uninvited. Lock the doors at 9 p.m. sharp. Do not wait a second longer. I swallowed hard, shaking my head at my own nerves. It was just a precaution, right? Maybe the host had a reason, wild animals, or maybe just overly cautious house rules. Either way, I wasn't about to test it. I double-checked the windows, shut the back door, and turned the lock on the front door at exactly 8:59 p.m. Settling onto the couch, I tried to shake the unease. Nothing had happened. Nothing would happen. I scrolled through my phone, let a movie play in the background, told myself I was just overthinking, and for a while, it worked. The night passed without incident, until I woke up to a sound that sent a chill straight through me. Knock, knock. 3 knocks on the front door. Slow, deliberate. My breath caught in my throat, my body locked up. If you hear any tapping or knocking between midnight and 3 a.m., do not answer. Do not open the door. The words from the email slammed into my head like an alarm. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay still. The knocking continued. Not frantic, not demanding, just patient. Knock, knock, knock. A steady rhythm, like whoever or whatever stood on the other side knew I was awake, knew I was listening. I turned my head ever so slightly toward the nightstand. My phone's screen glowed in the darkness. 4:42 a.m. I held my breath. And then, silence. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. The air in the room felt wrong, like the quiet had thickened. My skin prickled, every nerve in my body screaming at me not to move. I squeezed my eyes shut, pretending to be asleep, pretending I hadn't heard anything at all. But I couldn't sleep after that. I lay there, stiff as a board, my mind cycling through possibilities. Was it really nothing? Some late-night visitor? Lost in the jungle? A sick prank? My fingers itched to reach for my phone, to check the door, to look. But the rule stopped me. So, I stayed there, frozen, listening to the silence. I didn't sleep again until the first light of morning. The second night, I woke up again, but this time, it wasn't a sound that pulled me from my sleep. It was a feeling. The feeling that something was there. I didn't know how I knew it, but I did. I could feel it, standing just inches from my bed, watching me. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I wanted to move, to run, but my body wouldn't listen. I was completely frozen, paralyzed by the sheer wrongness of the moment. The air around me was thick and unmoving, as if the entire room had been drained of life. The walls, the ceiling, the bed, everything felt distant, unreal. If you wake up to any sensation of being watched, do not move until it stops. The words from the rules echoed in my mind. I squeezed my eyes shut and forced myself to obey. Seconds stretched into eternity. My fingers twitched, desperate to grab the blanket, to shield myself from whatever was there. But I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just waited. Then, just like that, it was gone. The air shifted, like a weight lifting from my chest. I sucked in a breath, feeling control return to my limbs. My heart was still hammering, but I could move again. Shaky, unsteady, I forced myself out of bed. My legs felt weak, but I needed water. I needed to do something, anything, to break the tension. I made my way to the kitchen, gripping the counter for support. The coolness of the tile beneath my feet grounded me, made me feel human again. But as I passed the living room, I saw something that made my stomach drop. There was something on the coffee table, a small wooden carving. I stepped closer, my breath hitching. The figure was of a man, his face twisted, hollow eyes staring, mouth stretched unnaturally wide, as if frozen in an eternal silent scream. I knew, without a doubt, that it hadn't been there before. I had checked the house when I arrived. Every room, every shelf, every table. This hadn't been here. The rule came rushing back. If you find any object in the house that wasn't there when you arrived, do not touch it. Email us immediately. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone. My fingers fumbled over the screen as I typed a message to Leilani. My breath uneven. She replied almost instantly. Do not touch it. Leave the house. Come back after sunrise. And when you return, do not look at the carving. Throw a towel over it. Take it outside. Bury it deep in the ground after sunset. Don't ask questions. I didn't need convincing. The moment I read those words, I was out the door. I didn't care how ridiculous it felt. I just ran. I stayed away until the sun had fully risen. The jungle was eerily quiet when I returned, and my hands were still shaking as I pushed open the door. The carving was still there. I forced myself not to look at it directly. I grabbed a towel from the bathroom, draped it over the figure, and lifted it with careful, trembling hands. Even through the fabric it felt wrong, too cold, too heavy for something so small. I walked deep into the jungle after sunset, my heart hammering with every step. The trees loomed high above me, their shadows stretching through the thick darkness. I dug a hole as fast as I could, shoved the carving into the earth and covered it with trembling hands. I didn't ask questions. I didn't look back. I sprinted to the house, locking the door behind me. My chest rose and fell rapidly, my skin slick with sweat. I needed to sleep. I needed this night to be over. But no sooner had I gone to bed, grabbed a blanket, and prepared to sleep than I heard a whisper. It was so soft, so close, like a breath against my ear. "Look at me. You must look at me," it said. A chill ran down my spine. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the blanket like a lifeline. The whispering continued, curling around me like smoke. "Look at me," it continued. And then stupidly, instinctively, I turned my head toward the sound. My breath caught in my throat. The carving was back. That was the moment I knew I had to leave. My entire body was screaming at me to run, to get out, to put as much distance between me and this cursed place as possible. My hands trembled as I stuffed my belongings into my bag, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I didn't care about being quiet. I didn't care about anything except getting out. But then, the last rule. Before leaving, sprinkle salt at the four corners of the house, and never look back when you go. I hesitated, my mind racing. Did it even matter anymore? Would it make a difference? But I wasn't about to take chances. My hands were numb as I grabbed the salt from the kitchen counter and rushed to each corner of the house, scattering it with quick, jerky movements. My legs felt weak, my chest tight with fear. When I reached the front door, I exhaled sharply, gripping the handle. Just open it. Just step outside. I twisted the knob. Nothing. I tried again, harder this time. The door didn't move. A sharp jolt of panic shot through me. I yanked at it, my breath hitching as I threw my weight against the wood. It wouldn't budge. Then, I heard a sound behind me. A soft, almost delicate rustle. The hairs on my neck stood on end. Every part of me screamed, "Don't turn around." But I did. And there it was. The wooden carving, sitting in the middle of the floor facing me. My pulse pounded in my ears. I took a slow step backward, my mind trying to make sense of the impossible. I had buried it. I had followed the instructions. But now, here it was, waiting, watching. Then the room shifted. The walls seemed to breathe, warping and twisting, the corners stretching in ways they shouldn't. My vision blurred as a heavy pressure settled over me, thick and suffocating. The air hummed, like something was waking up. And then, the carving moved. At first, just a twitch, a slow, deliberate tilt of its head. Then, its mouth opened wider, too wide, a gaping, unnatural void. And then, a voice came from it. "You didn't follow the rule," it said. A cold hand clamped down on my shoulder. I couldn't move. The touch burned like ice, freezing me in place. My breath hitched, my body locked in terror. The door suddenly burst open, a rush of wind slamming against me. I tried to run. I lunged forward, desperate to escape, but something pulled me backward. The walls spun, the room twisted around me. My screams echoed, swallowed by the air itself. And then, darkness. I don't remember hitting the floor. I don't remember what happened next. I just woke up. Morning light poured through the windows, painting the house in soft gold. For a moment I thought it had all been a dream. But the cold sweat on my skin, the racing of my heart, it was real. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed my bags and bolted for the door. This time it opened with ease. The jungle outside was quiet, the world peaceful again. But I didn't look back. Not once. Leilani never explained the rules. I never asked. And when I checked the Airbnb listing a few days later, it was gone, like it had never existed. I wanted to forget. I needed to forget. But this morning, a new email appeared in my inbox. From Leilani. "The house remembers you. It will call you back soon." My imaginary friend isn't imaginary. Okay, before anyone here calls me crazy, or starts trying to use WebMD or the DSM to diagnose me with a mental illness, let me explain myself. I think most of us had an imaginary friend when we were younger, whether you remember it well or just in passing. You probably had an imaginary friend in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it was a stuffed animal that you personified, or maybe it was just the voice in your head that kept you company. For me, it was the latter. Growing up, I was an only child. Combo that with the fact that I was homeschooled until high school, it probably isn't surprising to hear that I didn't exactly have many real friends. To be honest, my social circle consisted of my mom, my dad, and my grandmother, who was in charge of my homeschooling while my parents worked. Don't get me wrong, even without friends, my own age or people to hang out with, I wasn't an unhappy kid. In fact, I think I had a pretty good childhood. My grandmother says I had a pretty active imagination as a kid, and it delighted her to see how well I could keep myself entertained. Maybe I should introduce my imaginary friend. I called him Co. I can't remember if that's what he told me to call him, or if I came up with it, but that's his name. I'm not sure exactly when Co came into my life, but he was there with me through everything. Through the good and the bad times in my life, Co was there. During homeschooling, my grandmother would even make lesson plans to include Co, setting up assignments for him to complete and giving him questions to answer, which he always got right. Whatever we did, Grandma would always find a way to include Co. I want to make one thing clear. I never saw Co. I didn't know what he looked like, or if he looked like anything, but I could hear him. Not audibly hear him, but like the voice in my head kind of hear him. You know how you can hear what you sound like in your thoughts? Imagine that, but a totally separate voice, distinct from your own thoughts, ringing in your head. I knew Grandma couldn't hear Co, the same way my parents couldn't hear Co. If Co wanted to say something to my parents or my grandmother, he told me what he wanted to say and I communicated it for him. That meant that when Co was participating in class, I was answering the questions on his behalf. Like I said a little earlier, Co never got an answer wrong during class. I wasn't a dumb kid by any means. In fact, I think I was quite smart for my age. But Co knew answers to questions I'd never have a reason to know. I think whenever I answered those questions right, speaking for Co, my grandmother just assumed I'd been studying, or that I was like one of those genius kids. I'm sure you're wondering exactly why I'm bringing any of this up. If Khan isn't imaginary, it sounds like I've got the perfect cheat sheet to life, right? I could use him to pass any test, nail any interview, and overall better my life, right? Well, for a long time that's exactly what I did, except Khan didn't just guide me through the academic portions of my life. For all the skeptics still reading, I'm sure you've already rationally explained this as the overactive mind of a lonely child. Clearly, I actually knew the answers to any of the questions my grandmother put on a test. That I was using my imagination to solve my childhood and adolescent problems, coming up with the solutions myself, and using my inner thoughts as a springboard. I can't blame you for believing that. Even typing this now, I realize how absolutely insane this all sounds. I've typed and retyped some parts of this so many times, wondering if this is even worth posting about, or if anyone would take it seriously. Cole says I shouldn't, and for the first time in the memory of my life, I'm about to do the opposite of what Cole tells me. Yup, my not-so-imaginary friend Co is still with me. Even as I write this now, I can hear him in my head, screaming at me to stop, that I'm making a mistake, that no one will believe me. But I can't help but wonder, why does Co not want anyone to know he exists? That he really exists? I mean, Co won't answer that question. And when I ask, his response is a simple pleading request. You just need to trust me. I've spent my entire life, all 27 years of it, trusting Co, listening to everything Co tells me to do, and I have to admit, I think my life is better because of it. I graduated top of my class, both in high school and in college. I landed a comfy job, have a comfy life, and even have a lovely wife who is expecting our first child. Every single good thing that has come to me has been with Co's help, following his instructions. I applied to the college he told me to, applied for the job he told me to, married and fell in love with the girl he told me to. As I type this now, admitting it to myself in a tangible way, I wonder if I ever had any agency in my own life, and the thought that I didn't terrifies me. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering why I'd care. I just said that I'm living a dream life listening to Ko, so why would I want to change anything? Why would it bother me that I don't have traditional free will if my life is perfect? Why would I even think about it? I mentioned earlier that my wife is expecting. She's far enough along now that she learned it was a boy. Ko had already told me that it would be, despite me asking him not to tell me early, but I still feigned excitement for her sake. When we got pregnant, my wife and I decided to save the discussion of names for after we knew the gender. After finding out officially yesterday that we were having a boy, we spent all of last night trying to come up with names. I was practically no help, because Ko was flooding my mind with only one name. I tired to hold back. Something about naming my son after my imaginary friend just didn't sit right with me. But Ko was persistent, more persistent than had ever been about anything before in my life. It was like I'd never had a choice, as the name left my mouth. For the first time, while following Ko's suggestions, I felt like something was wrong. My wife smiled and told me she liked that name. I smiled too, but behind that smile a seed of doubt had now been planted. Doubt about every facet of my life that Ko had directed. I began to wonder if Ko's suggestions were ever really suggestions. If I ever had any choice in the matter when Ko told me to do something. Ko tried to wash away my worries, telling me that if I just kept listening to him, my life would always be perfect. But I need to know how much control I have now. I need to know that I have control over my own life. Because as crazy as it sounds, I'm not so sure that I do. That's why I'm writing and posting this. I guess this is kind of like a test to see if I really can resist cough, to see if I have any agency over my own actions. I want to know exactly how much free will I have. So I'm posting it here. I don't think I have to worry about anyone I know personally coming across it. Even if they did, the only people that would potentially know who I am based off the information given are my parents and my grandmother. And I'm pretty sure none of them use Reddit. So, that's about it, I guess. Thank you all for being my springboard and my confidant. If I have any updates after this, I'll give them, but I'm not exactly sure what I'd update with. I was thinking of maybe visiting my grandmother. She's in hospice care now in her very old age, but she's still cognizant. I wanted to ask her if she remembered anything in particular about my childhood that seemed weird or different, or if she remembers anything in particular about Koko. Koko hates the idea, but that only makes me want to do it more. I think Ko has resigned himself to the fact that I am going to post this, whether he wants me to or not. For the last few paragraphs, he's been pretty quiet, but I can't get the last thing he said to me out of my head. You will regret this. Well, I suppose I'll find out. No Man's Land. When Craig and I needed to get away, we went to a spot we called No Man's Land, a big dirt patch just outside of our small town of Birdsview. We would come here to talk and watch the stars, as well as the occasional plane or two that would pass every hour or so. No Man's Land was a sacred place that only me, Craig, and a girl or two in town knew of. A place we could visit to rant to one another about life problems, just have a few beers, or to just get away and feel a little smaller. Our town of Birdsview was roughly 30 minutes out from Allentown, Pennsylvania, where most of the people in our town worked, including us. We were still young, 2 years out of high school, and still couldn't decide on what we should be doing for the rest of our lives. I still lived with my parents, and Craig still lived with his mom. It had just been the two of them ever since his father passed away back when we were in the 2nd grade. So I knew I had to drop whatever I was doing and get the truck ready for No Man's Land when Craig had called me and told me his mom had just passed away. I rushed over to Craig's place where he was sitting on the curb at the end of his driveway. He got up slowly and climbed into the truck. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I guess so," he replied in a broken whisper. The rest of the ride was silent. I drove us to the local liquor store to get us a case of High Life, Craig's favorite beer. Craig stayed in the car, leaning to face out the window. Looked back a few times to check on him, but the chill of the wind that night made me turn my back to the truck. When the bell rang against the door, Bruce walked out from behind the counter to shut the door behind me. He muttered something about the damn door. Can't handle the breeze. I went straight to the fridge where they always keep a 12-pack of Millers. Bruce, a classmate of ours from high school, made his usual snide comments about what he thought me and Craig would be up to in the back of the truck in the middle of nowhere, as he scanned the beer. I'm glad I was the one to get the beer, as Craig was not one to take any shit from anyone, and especially never put up with Bruce's jokes. Some small laughs, and a rebuttal about what Bruce might be up to when no one else is in the store, is always enough to lighten the mood and get him off our backs. Although, I still remember something he said to me that night. Yeah, as long as all these damn ghosts will give me some fucking privacy. Them ghosts must be pretty damn bored to come screw around with you in here, I said jokingly. Bruce's smile faded a bit, and he leaned forward across the counter. Man, listen, man. Tonight's been especially active, brother. I'm talking doors swinging open, crazy noises coming from the ceiling, and get this, man, my power keeps going out. But whenever I get up to go check it, it all comes alive again. I leaned in close from the other side of the counter. You better quit testing out your product, Bruce, I muttered. He raised an almost finished fifth of Jim Beam Red Stag and said, Don't you go telling boss man now, before erupting in a laugh. You could hear from the back of the beer freezer. He told me to have a good night as I walked out, and I told him don't work too hard now, which got an even louder laugh than the last one. As I walked back to the truck, Craig was in the same position I left him in, until he perked his head up, looking past me and into the store. Halfway between the truck and the store, I turned around to see not a single light on in the entire place, like it had never even been open to begin with. Bruce walked out from the dark to forcefully close the door against the wind. As soon as he managed to get it shut, the store had suddenly come back to life, illuminating the truck, Craig and I, as well as Bruce's Trans Am, as the only things in the parking lot. Bruce looked at us, smiled, shrugged and gave a wave to me and Craig before turning back into the store and returning to his post. I heard one last muffled laugh as I loaded the beers into the truck and left. Still about 20 minutes from the spot, Craig decided to tell me what had happened. At 7 a.m. that morning, his mom had left for her job as a nurse at the hospital in the city. When she arrived at work, she had parked in the garage next to the building when what police believe was a younger man approached her. At around 7:50, her car was seen leaving the parking garage, which is the last they had seen of the vehicle. Shortly after, the police were called about a woman on the ground bleeding. Police and paramedics arrived to see the woman had died from 7 deep stabs into her back just below her neck. Craig had spent the entire day with police being questioned and waiting in the station. Craig, being at home sleeping that morning, apparently was not a good enough alibi for the police. He said he had only been home for about 15 minutes before he called me. He couldn't handle being at his mother's house after over 10 hours of questions about her. I did my best to console my best friend, and to my relief, he acknowledged that he doesn't expect a professional therapy session from me. He just needed to get away, to feel a little smaller. We made it to our spot around 10 that night, and got ourselves posted up in the bed of the truck. I had put in a row of seats from a smaller car to fit in the bed of my truck for nights at no man's land. It was a fun project that me and Craig had done just a few weeks back, and was well worth the effort. We sat and did our best to talk over the wind while we drank our beers. To an extent, my mind was at least taken off of the subject. Craig, however, would end our riffing a little sooner than usual, and begin to fall quiet. When I ran out of old memories to bring up, I remembered something I had bought that I thought he would like. I jumped down from the truck and rushed to the center console. As I climbed back in, I tossed him a laser pointer. What is this? Bought it at the liquor store. Try it out. See how far it goes, I said. He pointed it in front of us and hit the button. It shot out a green laser as far as we could see. We then heard a low droning noise. We assumed it might just be another car or a big rig somewhere, but we couldn't see any lights around us. We paid no mind to it, and continued pointing the laser into the void darkness all around us. We watched the strong gusts of wind carry the dirt and define the laser's beam as far out as we could make it. I was trying to hit a stop sign I had made out about a quarter mile to the left of us when Craig said, I wish there were some stars out tonight, or maybe even a plane. Still focused on my task at hand, I said without looking up to him, I think that's illegal, dude. Well, shining it at the stars isn't. Let me see it real quick. I kept my eyes locked on the spot where I thought the sign was as I surrendered the pointer to him. I figured he would realize he wouldn't be able to hit anything in space from the back of my truck, so I didn't bother to look and waited for him to hand it back over. A bright green line not 20 feet in front of me broke my stone solid state. It made me jolt back a bit. I laughed and turned to Craig only to see him fixed on the same diagonal beam coming down from the sky that I had seen roughly 20 feet from the truck. The strange thing, however, was that Craig was still shining the laser directly up into the sky. "Are you hitting a plane or something?" I asked. He didn't say anything. We stared at the pastel green cloud. The beam was shining through, trying to see past the cloud. Both of us jumped at the deep droning noise that had come back, breaking our deep focus. The wind had picked up at the same time. The second laser whipped in front of us, but with everything happening, Craig had kept our laser pointed directly up. He decided to try turning it on and off a bunch, keeping it in the same general direction. And when he did, the second laser was doing the same, but would hit the ground in different spots all around us. The wind was really moving now, so fast and harsh we could barely hear one another, but we had both known what was happening. The laser had been reflecting off of something. The light green cloud above us suddenly began to grow a dark red, at which point we rushed to get off the truck and take off. We were pushed down into the bed of the truck by the violent wind. On the floor of the bed, we both looked up to see the clouds split, revealing an incredible metal structure. It was smooth and dark, rounded on the bottom, and emitting a deep red light directly from what we thought was the center of this thing. The wind was at its strongest. We felt helpless and soon to be weightless. Before we could comprehend what was happening to us, we were lifted out of the truck bed, slowly moving towards the light. The wind had pushed us into two spinning tunnels of air apart from one another. I could see Craig screaming to me, but the droning had only gotten louder, and the wind tunnel hadn't helped my hearing either. I froze. All I could do was watch Craig do anything he could to get out. He took a knife from his pocket and opened it. I saw him look directly up and yell something before throwing it. The best he could directly up, along with his keys and wallet and whatever else he could find on him. It seemed to shake up the machine because the wind that had been lifting us shuddered a bit with each item that went up. It had soon stopped. At this point we were roughly 30 feet off the ground, frozen in the air. A thick cloud of vapor had released onto Craig and his screaming had fallen silent. He was still moving and fighting, but whatever the substance was had begun to sedate him. In one last effort to fight back, he took a lighter from his pocket. I recognized it, a gift from his dad that Craig had always kept with him to remember him, and with whatever strength he had left, he flipped it open and scratched a puny spark from the lighter. Within seconds, the gas had lit into a bright yellow, orange crimson that lit up the night sky like nothing I had ever seen. The flame spiraled up the tunnel of wind, catching every trace of the gas and transforming it into a terrifying inferno. Through the blaze, I could just make out the silhouette of my best friend's skin dripping to the ground like a candle's wax. The flame eventually made its way to the machine to reveal the things, our captors, our abductors. They were not human, too tall, too long, and just watching what was, just seconds ago. Craig, like nothing had even happened. In so much shock I had not realized the wind had picked back up, and I was on my way back up. They had released the same sour vapor into my tunnel, and all I could do was comply. There was nothing I could possibly do but accept that I had no more control. I felt so vulnerable, so helpless, so small. What happened next, I can only describe as dreamlike, just parts of memories. But whenever I try to recount it to myself, it feels like I'm telling it wrong. I opened my blurry eyes to find myself in what looked like a hospital room, but I knew that it wasn't. Everything was off. 2 TVs in each corner, a door that looked like it belonged in a bedroom, and I had been covered in towels, not blankets. The one detail I know I can remember is moving the towels down to reveal a scar running vertically in the center of my body, from my neck through my belly button. That's all I had cared to see or feel. The doorknob had begun shaking, so I flung myself back into the bed and shut my eyes, just barely peeking out. Enormous figures walked in. I assume the same ones I saw watching Craig. There were a few of them, and one had noticed my eyes. It signaled to the others. They walked over slowly and just touched my eyelids. I couldn't get them back open. The next thing I can recall is waking again, but in another room, the same kind of setup as the last one. Random things that someone might recall being in an operating room. I woke to see more scars all over my body. My vision was still blurry, but I could feel them all over. As my vision cleared, I noticed one of the things in the corner of the room. I looked next to the bed to find a tray of scalpels that didn't look right. Like if you had told me to draw one, it might have looked like this. I grabbed it and tried to stand, tripping over myself. I knew I was being too loud. I knew that the thing had heard me, but I didn't care. I stumbled my way to the thing and threw myself onto it. In a blind rage, I uncontrollably hit the creature and used the tool I had picked up. In an instant, my vision had cleared. I looked around to see where I was. I turned my head to find Craig's mother's car in an empty parking garage, and underneath me, with 7 deep cuts in their back, was Craig's mother. I shot up and panicked. I couldn't comprehend anything at the speed in which it was happening. The pool of blood spread, and I could hear sirens in the distance. I instinctively got into a car and drove out of the garage as fast as I could. I cried and yelled for as long as I could remember. In my screaming fit, I had closed my eyes and laid my foot on the gas just to open them again and find myself back in my own truck. I drove the entire night until I physically couldn't anymore. I found another barren patch of land where I could sleep in my truck for the night. I write this now, some months later, as an apology for Craig's mother, for my own parents who I know are worried sick about where I've been, for Craig, my best friend. I could not even begin to explain how I feel. I have expressed all my guilt and sadness. I feel void of emotion. I felt this way for weeks. Until yesterday, when I felt the breeze, smelled the sour wind. I know what I have to do. It's what Craig would have done for me. I am as prepared as I think I could be with a few knives, a firearm, a laser pointer, and a lighter. Craig's lighter that I just found in that dirt patch that we loved. That dirt patch I could never forget. That little dirt patch that we called no man's land. Don't mess with a dead man's phone. Lindsay and I shared a fascination with the macabre, a morbid curiosity that drew us to the hushed whispers of abandoned places. It was a shared passion, a strange counterpoint to the softer feelings we held for each other. Our Valentine's Day traditions were anything but traditional. One year, we'd spent the evening at a deserted cemetery, leaving wildflowers on the grave of a forgotten poet. Another, we'd had a horror movie marathon, complete with homemade blood punch. It was our way of celebrating, a little dark, a little twisted, but completely us. This year, Valentine's Day was just around the corner, and while other couples were planning romantic dinners, we were drawn to the shadows. This is way better than some cheesy restaurant, Lindsay had said, a mischievous glint in her eyes. As we planned our latest adventure, we talked about how one day we'd travel to all the most haunted places in the world, maybe even write a book about it. It was a silly dream, but it was our silly dream. So, when the local news whispered of a homicide 2 weeks prior in a nearby Victorian house, we knew it was our next stop. It was the kind of house that seemed to exhale stories of forgotten lives and tragic ends. Its darkened windows like vacant eyes. Lindsay, ever the thrill-seeker, insisted on going in first. "Don't worry," Shed teased. "You'll be careful." She returned with a handful of artifacts, the most intriguing being a pristine new Motorola phone, still in its box, with the receipt and everything. It was like it had never even been opened. "This is insane," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. "It's brand new, and I really need a new phone." Lindsay had been complaining about her cracked screen for weeks. "It was locked, of course. Help me crack this," she said, her voice a mix of excitement and unease, handing me the phone. We fumbled with it, trying various combinations, but it remained stubbornly locked. Finally, we resorted to a factory reset. It rebooted, demanding the Google account it was previously synced with. We hit a wall, bypassing that was a whole other level of tech wizardry. Out of curiosity, we explored the phone's photos. What we unearthed sent a shiver of dread down our spines. Images of dead infants, animals, brutally slaughtered in what looked like ritualistic arrangements. The photos were sickening, a glimpse into an abyss of depravity. Then, we stumbled upon an email address. Email address removed. "This is getting seriously creepy," I murmured, a knot of fear tightening in my stomach. "Just wait," Lindsay replied, her usual bravado tinged with a hint of nervousness. "It's probably nothing." But I saw the fear in her eyes, the way her hand trembled slightly as she held the phone. We rushed to my PC, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach, and attempted to hack into the account. What we discovered, I wish we could unsee it. Snuff films, linked directly to the phone. The videos were fragmented, glimpses into a nightmare realm. Lindsay recoiled, her breath catching in her throat. Not just the images, the sounds. The wet, sickening thud of something hitting flesh. A child's whimper, cut short. A distorted nursery rhyme, sung in a raspy voice that seemed to crawl from the speakers and into the room with us. A child's toy, a distorted nursery rhyme, the flicker of a blade. These flashes painted a portrait of unimaginable cruelty. She didn't speak, but her eyes, wide with terror, told the story. It wasn't just the violence. It was the casualness of it, the chilling banality of evil. I reached out and took her hand, squeezing it tightly. We were both terrified. Suddenly, the phone rang, jolting us from our horrified trance. The ringtone wasn't a ringtone at all. It was a distorted, guttural scream, followed by a raspy whisper. "I see you." A distorted, guttural voice rasped from the speaker, speaking of a place consumed by flames, children trapped within. The message was cryptic, chilling, radiating an aura of pure evil. We frantically tried to disconnect, but the call wouldn't end. The voice grew louder, closer, as if it were in the room with us. "You're next," it hissed. Panic seized Lindsay, and in a fit of terror, she smashed the phone against the wall. The following day, Lindsay appeared at my doorstep, her face ashen, her eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. "I should have never gone into that house," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Something's after me." "Lindsay, calm down," I said, trying to reassure her, though a shiver ran down my own spine. It was just a creepy phone call. We're probably just spooked. But she was inconsolable. We retreated to my room, the air thick with unspoken dread, and delved deeper into the Google account. Lindsay showed me a newspaper clipping she had printed at the library. A devastating orphanage fire in the 1960s. Every child and caregiver perished. The details eerily matched the distorted voice on the phone. We scrolled further, unearthing more videos. The man who lived in the Victorian house. He had documented his horrific acts, torturing children. Other people too. Individuals who had vanished without a trace. The things he did, they were beyond human comprehension. A descent into the deepest circles of hell. "I'm so scared," Lindsay whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I keep thinking about those kids, and what he did to them." Lindsay began to sob, her body racked with tremors. "There was someone still in the house when I was there," she confessed, her voice barely audible. She hadn't seen them, but she'd heard something moving in the shadows, a presence that radiated malevolence. A giggle. She'd heard a child's giggle, high-pitched and chilling, followed by the distinct sound of dragging, something heavy. That was when she fled, convinced she was being hunted. "Lindsay," I said gently, "I know you're shaken up, but are you sure? It could have just been the wind, or the house settling." I wanted to believe there was a rational explanation, but even as I spoke the words, I felt a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. The next day, Lindsay was gone. I returned to the Google account, my heart pounding in my chest. A new video had been uploaded. I clicked play, my breath catching in my throat. It was Lindsay. She was tied up in a dank, stone basement, strapped to an ancient furnace. Her eyes were wide with terror, but they weren't focused on the camera. They were looking to the side, pleading with someone just out of frame. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Then, a hand entered the frame, covering her mouth. The hand was pale, almost translucent, with long skeletal fingers. The video cut out. I immediately contacted the police, relaying the horrifying discovery. They raided the Victorian house, but Lindsay was nowhere to be found. Her distraught parents filed a missing person report, and the chilling tones of an Amber Alert echoed through the town. The mechanical voice, repeating "you're next," seemed to blend with the ringing in my ears, a terrifying premonition. Then, it dawned on me. This wasn't just about a serial killer's phone. It was something far more sinister. It was as if the ghost of the killer himself had orchestrated everything, his evil transcending death. He had meticulously concealed his crimes, and we had unwittingly stumbled upon his secrets. He had found a way to ensure the truth remained buried, even from beyond the grave. We chose to remain silent, paralyzed by fear, a chilling certainty that we were now his targets. We waited, our nerves frayed, our minds haunted by the images we had seen, the whispers we had heard. We waited for him to come, knowing Lindsay was downstairs, in the cold, dark basement. We waited. As I watched the video of Lindsay tied to the furnace, a cold dread settled over me. It wasn't just the image. It was the way she looked at the camera, a silent plea in her eyes. Then I noticed something else, something that made my blood run cold, a faint reflection in the metal of the furnace, a figure standing just behind the camera, a figure that looked disturbingly familiar. Had I, in some way, enabled the killer? Had my own dark desires played a part in Lindsay's fate? I returned to the Victorian house, drawn by an irresistible force. The basement was cold, damp, and silent. The furnace stood in the center of the room, its metal surface gleaming in the dim light. I could almost hear Lindsay's screams echoing in the darkness. Or was it just my imagination? I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that I was trapped in this nightmare, a prisoner of my own dark secrets. The thought of Valentine's Day, just days away, twisted in my gut. It was supposed to be a celebration of our love, not a descent into hell. I found a small wrapped box, tucked under a loose floorboard. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay the shattered remains of the Motorola phone. A note was attached. To my dearest, happy Valentine's Day. I can't wait to spend eternity with you. Tears streamed down my face. I loved her. I whispered to the empty room, the words hollow and unconvincing even to myself. Bride in the blood-stained dress. The two men lay prone on a hill. John scans the area with binoculars, while Nick sights through a sniper rifle. They are quiet, knowing better than to talk outside the compound's protective walls. This is a job that must be done. Despite all the precautions taken, sometimes they just wander too close. That's why the two men are here. They'll clear up any stragglers in the area and keep the compound safe. John nudges Nick gently, indicating a woman shambling out of the trees. A tattered veil trails behind her, catching and tearing on branches. Nick snorts softly, watching the woman in the blood-splattered wedding gown pause as she finally exits the forest. Rose smiles to herself as she adjusts the veil a final time. Today is the biggest day of her life. Today is her wedding day. She's finally marrying the man of her dreams, Alex. The only thing missing is some guests. With the recent riots, not everyone could make it. Rose understands that, yet she still wishes that all of her friends and family could be here today. The carefully selected band didn't even show. They aren't answering their phones either. Still, it could be worse. Rose's smile never falters as she nods to an usher. The wedding march is piped through the church sound system as she starts the walk towards her husband-to-be. At least they have a stereo for some music. Alex stands tall and proud in his marine dress blues. His eyes grow misty as he watches his bride approach. A part of him feels guilty, but he pushes that part down. This is his wedding day. He was given leave, and he hasn't been recalled. His unit must be handling the riots fine without him. What chance do unarmed and unorganized rioters have against the Marines? The preacher smiles at those assembled before him and begins to speak. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Rose and Alex stare at each other, their hands clasped. The world has faded to just them. No one and nothing else matters. If anyone here objects to this marriage, the preacher jumps as banging sounds on the heavy church door as the guests turn to look. Well, I've never actually had anyone object before, he mutters under his breath to some laughter. An usher quickly stands and rushes to open the door, likely just a latecomer. Alex reassures his bride, who is looking queasy and nervous. She nods with a smile, trusting him utterly. The usher opens the door, then screams and turns to run. He doesn't get far. Someone pounces and begins to violently tear at his back. Blood splatters the church walls, splashing obscenely over a statue of the Holy Mother. Is that the band? Rose whispers as Alex pushes her behind him. The guests scream in panic at the grisly scene before them. They stumble backward, pushing and shoving as the rest of the seemingly demonic band appears in the doorway and rushes forward. The band attacks any guests they can get their hands on, tearing at flesh with terrifying howls of enjoyment at the taste of raw flesh. Alex draws his Beretta 92 FS one-handed, pushing Rose behind him. We have to go. There's too many. I fucking knew I should have packed an extra mag. He sights down the pistol, firing 3 rapid shots into the center mass of the Celeste. The Celeste rocks back, howling before rushing forward again. What the fuck? What the fuck? He mutters before shooting again, this time taking the thing down with a shot to the head. 13 shots left, Alex whispers, knowing that even if every shot is perfect, he doesn't have enough. There are too many guests. His eyes narrow with concentration as he keeps firing, his breath even and calm, despite the panic hovering at the edge of his consciousness. His bride is here. and he's not sure he can protect her. 10 bodies lay before the altar by the time the pistol slide locks back. Empty. He's empty, and there are more of those things coming. It wasn't enough to protect Rose. Alex holsters the pistol on pure instinctual training and grasps a heaving candlestick. He will not go down without a fight. Rose screams as Alex pushes her back towards the back office. He's breathing hard as he slams the door, dragging a heavy end table over to further block it. Positive the line is dead. Rose looks at him with wide eyes as the receiver drops from her limp hands. Alex leans against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment. It's fine. We'll wait it out. I won't leave you. He takes Rose into his arms, comforting her. He knows he's made a grave mistake, a mistake that will cost them both their lives. He can hear the wedding guests growl at the door, slamming themselves against it. It's like they can sense there's prey trapped inside, like they can smell the humanity of those within. This office is a dead end. The window is too small to escape through, and there's only one exit, which is now blocked by those who came to see the happiest day of his life. Alex takes Rose into his arms again, kissing her deeply. I do. She blinks in confusion. That was the next part. He takes a pair of golden rings from his pocket. I, Alexander Hall, take you, Rose Butler, for my lawful wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. I will love and honor you all the days of my life. Rose smiles at him, tears in her eyes as she slips the ring onto his finger. I, Rose Butler, take you, Alexander Hall, for my lawful husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. I will love and honor you all the days of my life. She sobs softly as he slips the ring onto her finger and kisses her deeply. Rose clings to him, jumping each time a body thuds against the office door. I have something I need to tell you, she whispers. I was going to wait until after the wedding, but... Alex, I'm pregnant. Alex looks at her, a brilliant smile breaking across his face. Oh, honey. The happy expression fades as the door jumps as another body hits it and starts to splinter. Tears roll down his cheeks as he looks at the door and back to his beautiful bride. The bloodied and torn hands reach in through the gaps of the door, reaching for them as howls fill the air. Can he really let his bride die so painfully, so horrifically? Alex kisses his wife a final time, holding her tightly before he moves behind her and swiftly breaks her neck. At least she won't suffer. Alex collapses onto the floor, sobbing as he cradles his wife's body. He looks up as the door finally breaks, the end table doing little now to stop the onslaught. He smiles at Rose as she twitches and growls, rising up to glare at him with hunger in her eyes. I love you, honey. He gently strokes her face, further words drowned in a gurgle of blood as she tears his throat out. Mick's finger hesitates on the trigger of the rifle, then loosens as a man exits the thicket of trees. He's dressed in what once was marine blues, and he stops next to the woman. They look at each other before turning and shambling into the sunset, away from the compound. Then, no threat, he whispers to John. This is why I stopped closing my eyes in the shower. My early life inoculated me against believing in ghosts. Childhood offered a brutal education in the very real horrors of abuse and neglect. Experiences far more chilling than any campfire tale. The spectral apparitions of popular lore seemed almost trivial in comparison. My refuge, somewhat unexpectedly, was Landon, a fervent devotee of the paranormal. He embraced every creak in the floorboards, every unexplained whisper. Initially, I was dismissive, but his kindness was a stark contrast to the harsh realities I'd known. Our relationship began with late-night viewings of low-budget documentaries and hushed discussions in the dark. Then, inexplicably, a winning lottery ticket, perhaps, or a conveniently unmentioned benefactor, he secured funding. A documentary, centered on Jepson Bones' killing floor. The name itself sounded like pulp fiction, and I initially dismissed the entire endeavor as a flight of fancy. That is, until I encountered the legal documents. Official contracts, replete with daunting clauses, bore both his signature and, to my increasing unease, my own. The realization dawned. This was no jest. We were committed. Thus, a hardened skeptic, whose personal history could rival the darkest of novels, found herself on a desolate stretch of Nevada highway, alongside a team of eager paranormal investigators. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting elongated, ominous shadows across the crumbling facade of the abandoned prison. It was an unsettling structure, seemingly materializing out of the desert itself. No one in the nearby towns seemed to know its origins. No records existed of its construction, and its presence was barely a whisper in local history. This was the destination, the infamous killing floor, a place known only through a single chilling legend. And everything I thought I understood about fear, about the nature of monsters, about the things that lurk in the unseen corners of the world, was about to be irrevocably altered. The drive out had been enlightening. Landon, bless his heart, had assembled a team from a reputable paranormal investigation agency. These weren't wide-eyed amateurs like him. These were seasoned professionals, each with their own specialty. EMF readings, EVP analysis, even a psychic medium, and they all knew the story. All of them except me. You've never heard of Jepson Bone, Dr. Aris Thorne, the team's lead investigator, and a man whose perpetually furrowed brow suggested he'd seen things that couldn't be unseen, had asked, his voice laced with a mixture of disbelief and morbid curiosity. Landon, sensing my ignorance, had taken over, eager to share his obsession. Jepson Bone wasn't just some crazy guy, it explained, his voice hushed with reverence. He was something else, something ancient. Before the prison, before any building at all, this land belonged to him. He was a butcher, a monster in human skin. They say he roamed these plains, killing anyone who crossed his path. Men, women, children, it didn't matter. He delighted in it. People called him by different names. The Jester of Jaws, the Crimson Harlequin, the Giggling Reaper, but the terror he inspired was always the same. And it wasn't just random killings. Chimed in Sarah, the team's psychic, her eyes distant, as if she were peering into the past. It was ritualistic, almost sacrificial. They say he'd drain his victim's blood, use it to paint symbols on the ground, symbols of something dark. Landon continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Eventually, his reign of terror ended. They caught him, finally, but they didn't just hang him. They buried him alive, right here, on this very spot. They say his spirit, it's still here, trapped, infusing the very ground with his evil. That's why they call it the killing floor. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Even if you leave this place, Alicia, he said, his eyes meeting mine, he follows you. But why a clown? I asked. The image of a painted face, twisted in a rictus grin, flickering in my mind. It seemed so incongruous, so childish, so wrong. Sarah's eyes flickered back to the present, a flicker of understanding in their depths. The clown, that's part of the ritual too, she said softly. It's a mockery, a twisted imitation of joy. Jepson Bone, he wasn't just a murderer, he was a defiler. He took the most innocent things, laughter, joy, childhood, and corrupted them, turned them into instruments of fear. Dr. Thorne, ever the historian, chimed in. There are historical precedents, you know. The medieval Feast of Fools, for instance. Rituals where the social order was inverted, where jesters and fools reigned supreme for a single night. But it wasn't just about revelry. There was a darker side to it, a connection to ancient pagan rites, sacrifices made to appease something old, something hungry. Landon nodded, picking up the thread. And clowns themselves, their history is more complicated than we think. They weren't always just entertainers. In some cultures they were seen as liminal figures, existing between worlds, tricksters, agents of chaos, even psychopomps, guides of the dead. He paused, his gaze fixed on some unseen point beyond the prison walls. Jepson Bone, he tapped into something primal, something ancient. He perverted the symbols of joy, turned them into instruments of terror. He became more than human. He became the embodiment of fear itself, cloaked in the guise of laughter. A chill, colder than the desert night, ran through me. For the first time, the idea of ghosts, of something beyond, didn't seem so ridiculous. It felt possible and terrifying. The van shuddered to a halt, its headlights cutting through the oppressive darkness that clung to the prison like a shroud. Stepping out onto the uneven ground, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The prison loomed before us, a grotesque monument to suffering and despair. Its walls were scarred and cracked, the rusted bars of its windows like skeletal fingers reaching out into the night. The wind whistled through the broken panes, and for a moment I could have sworn I heard it, a chorus of hushed screams carried on the breeze, whispering tales of unimaginable torment. Do you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, my eyes darting nervously towards the others. Landon, his face pale in the moonlight, looked as if he were about to suggest we pack up and head back to civilization. But the rest of the team, they were practically vibrating with excitement. Sarah, the psychic, had her eyes closed, a serene smile playing on her lips. Mark and Emily, the tech specialists, were already unloading equipment from the van, their movements brisk and efficient. "Hear what, Alicia?" Mark asked, his voice tinged with a hint of amusement. "The wind?" "No. It sounds like screaming," I stammered, feeling a blush creep up my neck. Sarah's eyes snapped open, and she turned towards me, her gaze intense. "Yes," she breathed. "I hear it too. So many voices, trapped, suffering." A shiver ran down my spine. This was no ordinary haunting. This was something else. Iris Thorne, ever the pragmatist, clapped his hands together. "All right, team," he announced, his voice firm. "Let's get to work. Mark, Emily, set up the base camp. Sarah, I want you to do a preliminary sweep of the perimeter. Landon, Alicia, you're with me. We'll start with the main cell block." He paused, his eyes glinting in the darkness. "This is going to be a good one." And with that, we stepped across the threshold into the belly of the beast, a carnival of unimaginable suffering. The initial exploration of the prison's interior yielded a chilling discovery. While the rest of the structure was eerily devoid of any signs of recent habitation, the killing floor itself was a scene of macabre artistry. Skeletal remains, some still bearing tattered remnants of clothing, lay scattered across the cracked concrete. The bones themselves were adorned with strange symbols, crudely etched yet disturbingly precise. "These aren't fresh," Dr. Thorne observed, his voice grim. "No one's been here for decades at least." I glanced at Landon. The color had drained from his face, leaving him a sickly shade of green. It was then I realized something. He might have been a believer in the paranormal, but I could see in his eyes that he hadn't truly believed in this. The reality of Jepson Bone, the palpable evil that permeated this place, was settling in on all of us, even the seasoned professionals. But fear, it seemed, wasn't enough to deter them. The equipment was set up. Cameras, recorders, EMF readers, all humming with anticipation. The seance began, the air thick with tension. And then, everything changed. It wasn't just the whispers, the flickering lights, the sudden drops in temperature. It was him. Jepson Bone. Not a wispy apparition, but a full-bodied manifestation of pure malice. He was everything the legends described, and more, a clownish figure with eyes that burned like embers, a grotesque parody of joy. He radiated an aura of power that dwarfed anything I'd ever imagined. This wasn't just a ghost. This was a primal force of darkness, something that made the demons of my childhood seem like playful imps. And then, before our very eyes, he acted. He didn't just haunt. He killed. It was Sarah, the psychic, the one who had sensed him first, who had spoken of the trapped voices. He turned his attention on her, his movements swift and brutal, a horrifying ballet of supernatural violence. One moment she was there, her eyes wide with terror. The next, he was upon her. His grin widened, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth, and with a sickening wet sound, he plunged his hand into her chest. Not through it, but into it. His fingers, impossibly long and skeletal, wriggled within her torso, as if searching for something. Sarah's screams turned into gurgled gasps as blood erupted from her mouth, her eyes bulging in their sockets. He didn't pull anything out this time. Instead, he clenched his fist, and with a series of sickening crunches, crushed her ribcage from the inside. Her bones audibly snapped and compressed, her body contorting into a grotesque, unnatural shape. Then, with a horrifyingly casual flick of his wrist, he rolled her now compacted form across the floor. It slammed into the wall with a sickening thud, leaving a smear of blood and viscera. He chuckled, a high-pitched childish giggle, and then, as if he were bowling, he picked up her body, now almost spherical, and swung it with tremendous force towards the rest of us. The sight was too much. Panic erupted. Screams filled the air, my own among them. As we scrambled to escape the monstrous entity, the room descended into chaos, equipment crashing to the floor as we fled. The image of Sarah's mutilated body, used as a projectile, seared into my mind forever. We never returned to that place. The company that had funded Landon's ill-fated project sent their own team to retrieve the footage. They managed to recover some of it, chilling, undeniable proof of Jepson Bone's existence. His spectral form, clear as day, was captured on camera. But the rest, the crucial moments, the horror we had witnessed, were lost, replaced by static. But not just any static. This was different. Embedded within the white noise were fleeting images, glimpses of faces contorted in agony, thousands of them, as if the very air itself was screaming. The recovered footage was a sensation, of course, irrefutable evidence of the paranormal, but none of us who were there that night felt any sense of triumph. We carried the weight of what we had seen, the knowledge of the true nature of the evil that lurked within those walls, the fame, the recognition. It meant nothing. All it did was remind us of Sarah, of the terror, and of the fact that Jepson Bone was still out there. And that, even now, years later, I could still feel the phantom weight of his gaze on my back, the echo of his chilling laughter in my ears. The disappearances began subtly, almost unnoticed. A missing person here, a vanishing without a trace there. But then, the frequency increased. News reports blared headlines about the growing number of unsolved cases. Faces of the missing flashed across television screens, their stories recounted in hushed, worried tones. Newspapers ran front-page articles speculating about possible causes, ranging from the mundane to the bizarre. And then, the reporters came to our doors. They wanted to know if we knew anything about the disappearances. Did we have any leads? Had we seen anything suspicious? Landon, his face etched with a fear I knew mirrored my own, became a master of deflection. He crafted plausible alibis, offered vague, non-committal responses, and did everything he could to avoid drawing attention to what we knew. Because we did know, we knew why these people were vanishing. We knew the chilling truth that no one else suspected, and the knowledge of it was a constant gnawing terror, a weight that pressed down on us with every passing day. We were living with a secret so monstrous, so unbelievable, that sharing it would only paint targets on our backs. We were trapped in a silent pact of fear, bound together by the horror we had witnessed, the horror that now stalked the streets, claiming its victims one by one, and we were terrified, fucking terrified. The weight of our shared secret hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket of dread that threatened to consume us. But that night, Landon, bless his soul, tried to pierce through the darkness. We sat at our small kitchen table, the remnants of a simple pasta dinner pushed aside. He reached across, his hand finding mine, his touch a lifeline in the storm. "Alicia," he said, his voice low and earnest, "I promise you, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to find a way to stop him. There's always a way." His words, though laced with a desperate hope, were a balm to my frayed nerves. He was still that kind. Determined Landon I had fallen for, the one who refused to let the darkness win. He leaned in, his eyes locking with mine, and in that moment, the fear seemed to recede, replaced by a flicker of something akin to love, a defiant spark in the face of overwhelming odds. "Well, figure it out," he whispered, his lips brushing against my forehead. "I won't let him take you. I promise." Later that night, the warmth of his words still lingering, I stepped into the shower. The hot water cascading over my skin was a welcome respite, a temporary escape from the chilling reality that awaited outside the bathroom door. I closed my eyes, letting the steam and the rhythmic sound of the water wash away the anxieties that had plagued me throughout the day. "Landon," I called out, a smile playing on my lips as I heard the bathroom door creak open. "Is that you?" Silence. "Landon, why aren't you answering me?" I chuckled, playfully. "Cat got your tongue?" Still no response. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. Something wasn't right. With a growing sense of dread, I slowly opened my eyes. And then I saw him. Jepson Bone. Not a suggestion, not a shadow, but him, in all his grotesque glory. He stood in the doorway, his clownish face, a mask of pure evil. He held something in his hand, something that made my blood run cold. It was Landon's head, not neatly severed, but torn from his body, the ragged edges of his neck glistening with blood. And something else. Wisps of tissue and sinew clung to the torn flesh, dangling like grotesque decorations. His eyes, wide and vacant, stared up at the ceiling, a single tear track etched through the blood that matted his hair. One side of his face was missing, chewed away, leaving a gaping hole that revealed the bone beneath. Jepson Bone grinned, a wide, terrifying expanse of teeth, flecked with red. He took a step closer, and then another. He didn't need to speak. His presence, the chilling stillness, the grotesque trophy in his hand, said it all. He had promised to protect me, and he had failed. Now, it was my turn. As a final twisted jest, Jepson Bone raised Landon's head. With a sickening wet slap, he positioned the bloody, mutilated face so that its sightless eyes covered my nakedness. The grotesque parody of modesty was the final devastating blow. Terror gave way to a chilling, hollow despair. I was trapped, not just by fear, but by the utter, obscene violation of everything I knew. But this isn't just my story. It's yours now, too. You've heard the name, haven't you?
Jepson Bone.
It's a sticky thing, isn't it? Like a burr, clinging to your thoughts. You've imagined his face, haven't you? That grotesque parody of a smile. Those eyes that burn like holes punched through hell. You've pictured the horror, the blood, the terror.
You haven't you? Don't lie.
I know you have, and that's all it takes. A whisper in the dark, a fleeting image in the corner of your eye, and he's there. He's always there, lurking just beyond the edge of your perception, a predator in the shadows of your mind. So, tell me, do you feel that chill crawling up your spine, that prickling sensation at the back of your neck? That's him. He's closer than you think. He's breathing down your neck, whispering promises of pain in your ear. And I'm so sorry for what you've just unleashed. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unhear what you've heard. He's in your head now, burrowing deep, making a home for himself in your nightmares. Sleep tight and watch your back, because he's watching you, waiting. The only escape from the curse is a cruel trick of the light. There is no escape. There is only transference, to inflict it upon another, to pass the hex like a venomous touch, letting their own fear give him shape and substance. This title is the lure. It draws you in. It promises a story, but delivers a curse. The others didn't just die. They were vessels, each one slowly corrupted, their terror recorded on grainy, flickering video, a testament to the curse's insidious power. Like the cursed videotape from Japan, the documentary's release was a sacrifice, a dark pact made in exchange for notoriety, a Faustian bargain paid in screams. This prison, like those impossible staircases that twist and vanish in the blackest heart of the woods, feels fundamentally wrong, a tear in the fabric of reality itself. Was it always here, a malevolent entity waiting in the wings of existence, or did some unholy act, some forgotten rite, summon it into being? It doesn't matter. I know the ritual now, the words to pass the curse on. And by reading these words, so do you. We're bound together now, trapped in this nightmare. There is no escape. There is only sharing the terror. As for me, well, my soul forever roams the home of Jepson Bone, the place they call the killing floor. You'll be joining me soon. We're all waiting. The Mimic. Autumn was arriving, and Autumn was loving every minute of it. It wasn't quite technically fall for another week or so, but the dog days of summer had largely passed without baking her little New England town into a crisp, and an overnight cold front had brought the temperature down into the 60s this particular September morning. Autumn loved the fall, the season her parents had named her after. She loved the hayrides and scarecrows, and the entire fall aesthetic, sweater weather and snuggling with her boyfriend, Paul. Most of all, Autumn loved Halloween. Autumn lived for Halloween. She and Paul had gone trick-or-treating every year together since they were children, well before they were dating. Since they started going out in the 9th grade, they regularly wore couples' costumes together, which were always the talk of any Halloween party they visited. This year she had several excellent ideas for costumes, and was sitting on her porch making a list in her phone so that she could go over it with Paul when he got home from work that evening. Halloween was only 6 weeks away, after all, and they had to be prepared. Better yet, Halloween was her birthday. This year she would be turning 20, though Paul didn't leave his teenage years until the following March. Autumn had never really celebrated her birthday with parties or cake or anything like that, minus even on her sweet 16. She celebrated by having her friends over and watching The Mummy. Halloween was always more than enough. Autumn finished her list of costume ideas, well enough to go over with Paul at least, and stood and stretched. A cool breeze was rolling in off the mountains to her west, and it made her shiver the slightest bit. Delightful, she thought. Bring it on. Fall. She popped back into her parents' old Cape Cod-style home and headed to the kitchen. There, Autumn filled the kettle with water and set it to boil on the stove. Opening the cabinet, she perused her collection of teas, trying to select one that best fit her mood for the day. Settling on a calming chamomile, she set the tea bag and a clean mug on the counter to wait for the kettle to boil. Miserap, a little voice chimed up from behind her, as her petite yellow cat Flo headbutted her furiously, angry at the lack of attention she was getting. Hello, Flo, Autumn greeted her cat. Rap, Flo responded. Flo was short for cornflower, but the name the cat had actually been given at the shelter which Autumn adopted her from was cornmeal, owing to her yellow color. The changing of cats' names is very common, and Flo was no exception. Autumn picked the cat up and cradled her like a human child. How's my baby today? Flo borrowed her head between Autumn's arm and her chest and purred contentedly. Suddenly, Autumn heard her phone chime in the other room. I'll get that in a second, she thought. Then, it chimed again, and again, and again. Then, ding, ding, ding. Who is blowing up my phone? Autumn wondered aloud. She crossed the dining room into the living room and picked up her phone off the coffee table. There were 2 missed calls and 3 unread texts from a phone number she didn't recognize. Autumn. The first text read, Paul had you listed as an emergency contact. There's been an accident at the plant, said the next text. The next text made Autumn's heart drop. Paul is at St. Andrew's Memorial Hospital. Hurry, he might not have much time left. There were 3 days left until Halloween, and Autumn had never felt less festive in her life. Losing Paul had guaranteed this year to be the worst Halloween ever. She had barely left her room since he passed at the hospital, much less left the house. She had no costume ready, and no plans for the holiday. Besides Floss Company, she was completely and totally alone. She laid in her bed staring at the ceiling, doing absolutely nothing. Flo purred happily at her feet, enjoying a nice afternoon snooze. Her second-floor bedroom window was open, letting in that cool autumn breeze that she loved so much. Her cell phone was powered off. It didn't matter. Nobody had texted her in some time. After the initial flurry of friends coming out of the woodwork with their "I'm so sorry for your loss" texts. There was a rustling outside of Autumn's window, and it piqued her curiosity. She sat up on the bed, causing Flo to stretch with a chirp. Through her rustling white silk curtains, she could see a dark mass outside the window, the silhouette of a large bird sitting on the windowsill. Hello, she called to the bird. This was not uncommon. Autumn talked to pretty much every animal she came across. What's your name? She drew the silk curtain back and saw the pale white face of a barn owl staring back at her through the window screen. Who? The owl asked. Autumn laughed. I'm sorry, she said. Who are you? The bird cocked its head and looked her up and down. Who? She knelt by the window, her face inches away from the owl's, separated only by the window screen. Flo hopped down off the bed and curiously approached the owl, staying just behind Autumn. Autumn brought her hand to her chest. My name is Autumn. What's yours? The owl cocked its head the other way and eyed the cat cautiously. Turning to face Autumn again, it flapped its wings out and rushed at the window screen, letting out a furious screech. Paul. Autumn woke up on her bedroom floor. The window was open, and the silk curtains fluttered in the wind. It was dark outside now, and the light was still off in her bedroom. By the orange light of the street lamp outside, she could see Flo curled up beside her, slumbering away on the carpet. What an unusual dream, she thought, as she picked herself up. A frigid gust of wind rushed into the room, whistling through the window screen and making the curtains dance madly. Autumn shivered as the temperature in the room dropped, and turned to shut the window. Just then, she noticed two curious things. First, the sunset had brought with it snow. Fluffy white snowflakes showered down steadily from the sky, which was lower than usual, and lit up orange by the city lights. The world outside was brighter than normal for this time of day, as a matter of fact, and Autumn realized that she had no real idea what time it was. Dimmer than daylight, but much brighter than night. The light reflecting off the snow below and the clouds above had cast the entire town into a state of twilight. Second, she gasped as she noticed the form of a tall, lanky boy laying in the snow on her front lawn. "Paul," she cried through the window, forgetting for a moment that her boyfriend was supposed to be dead. Yet, it was definitely him. She would recognize him anywhere. She slammed shut the sash on her window, turned, jumped over the cat who was still slumbering on the floor, and barreled down the stairs, across the living room, and out the front door. Sure enough, there she found Paul laying face first in the snow. Frantically, she helped her boyfriend up as he groaned with effort. That's when she noticed his condition. His skin was pale, and his lips were blue. He had a gash across his face, starting at his hairline and crossing his forehead, down across his right eye, which was bruised and swollen shut, and onto his cheek, where it terminated, right where his scruffy blonde beard started. "Paul, oh my God," she muttered. "Look at you. I thought you were dead." "Dead?" Paul asked in a tired voice. "Yeah, the accident. The hospital." She shook her head. "No matter, you must be freezing. Your skin is absolutely pallid, and you're cold to the touch. Let's get you inside." Paul nodded. "Inside," he repeated between his chattering teeth. Autumn took his hand and led him through the snow up the porch and into the front door she hadn't bothered to shut behind her. He stopped briefly at the threshold, looking confused. He glanced down at the ground, then around the porch. He looked over his shoulder, then back at Autumn, turning his head ever so slightly. "You're out of it," she muttered. "Come on, let's warm you up." She took his hand and yanked him across the threshold and into the house. Autumn sat Paul down on the couch and wrapped a blanket around him. "You're freezing," she said, noting that his skin was actually cold to the touch. "It's a wonder you don't have frostbite already. Let me make some tea, yeah?" Paul looked up at her with his good eye. "Tea, yeah," he said, and nodded his head. Autumn smiled at him and headed into the kitchen. "What kind of tea do you want?" she asked. "We've got black, Earl Grey, white, oolong, peppermint, chamomile, chamomile." Paul responded. "Chamomile. It is. My favorite." She filled the kettle with water and set it on the stove to boil. Wandering back into the living room, she noticed Flo had descended the stairs and was watching her boyfriend. "Look, Cornflower," she said. "Paul's here. Didn't you miss him so much?" Cornflower dismounted the staircase and cautiously crossed the living room floor, tail limp against the ground. She sniffed Paul tentatively, and he reached a hand out to her to get a better smell. The cat acted cautious at first, but after a minute or so of sniffing, she decided that Paul's scent was good enough and rubbed her head against his hand, as if to ask for chin scritches. Autumn leaned against the doorframe watching Paul interact with the cat. As she watched him, she noticed that his head injury, while not seeping with infection or actively bleeding or anything, didn't exactly look like it was healing well. She cautiously asked, "Hey, Paul." Pulled from the cat, Paul looked up at her. "What exactly happened?" she asked. "With the accident. They told me that you were dead." "Dead?" he asked. "Dead," Autumn repeated. "The police called and everything. They told me there was an accident at work, that you had hit your head, and that you had died." "I had died," Paul stated, matter-of-factly, and returned to petting the cat. A shiver ran down Autumn's spine. "Paul?" she asked, cautiously. "Do you remember our anniversary?" He looked at her blankly. "Our anniversary? Are you okay?" "Okay." "Paul, you're scaring me." Paul looked back at the cat and continued petting her. "Paul," he said vacantly, "you're scaring me." Autumn was petrified. This thing petting her cat was definitely not her Paul. In one solid motion, she swooped Flo out of his lap, ran past him, and out the door into the snow. The screen door slammed shut behind her, but then she heard it creak open again. Turning around, she saw Paul standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the light streaming out of the house. into the dark, snowy morning air. "Paul, you're scaring me," he called from the porch, not quite a shout, but definitely louder than before. "Stop it," she shrieked back in his direction. The cat struggled to break free from her grip, but she tucked her tight into her chest. Taking several stumbling steps backwards into the snow, which now lay 3 inches deep across the yard, she began to sob with a mix of horror and despair. "Stop it," Paul responded blankly. Flo twisted in Autumn's grip, and her claw caught the bare flesh of her arm and punctured it. She swore quietly and dropped the cat, who ran right back up to the house. Horrified, she watched the cat approach Paul, but he just idly watched her as she bounded up the stairs and back into the screen door. "Stop it," Paul repeated, and took a step forward. Autumn let out a piercing wail as she turned and tried to run, but her foot slipped in the mushy snow beneath her, and she collapsed onto the ground. She tried to claw her way forward, but was making little progress through the slush. She heard another piercing wail, exactly like hers in pitch and intonation, breaking the dark, stormy morning. Autumn turned over and looked back towards the house as the thing that was not Paul released its unearthly shriek again and began rapidly and inhumanly walking towards her across the yard. There are no shadows here. There is a ghost town called Amber Morn. It is surrounded by infamous carmine waters of Rose Lake. Titan arums are said to grow around this lake. The sights are not why Dakari is interested in this location. It is Amber Morn itself. Rumors say that the town is still inhabited, which piqued Dakari's interest in this place. Many of these tales have including things such as the townspeople being demons, or they are a cult that made visitors disappear. Regardless of what was being said, he is determined to find it. He was in no way an expert at hiking, so Dakari did all his research online, possibly overpacking for this trip, lugging the heavy pack onto a bus bound for a bus stop closest to where Amber Morn is supposed to be. He received an eye roll from the driver who motioned with a thumb towards the back of the bus. Of course, he knows I am an amateur, thought Dakari, wobbling a bit, heading to an empty seat. Putting his pack in the extra seat, he sat down, gazing out the window, getting off the bus when his stop came into view. Dakari began to regret packing so much. Well, it is what he deserves for trusting so many reliable sources. Unfolding the map from his back pocket, Dakari looked at the carefully planned route he charted. Of course, it had to compare to older references, so there were bound to be a few hiccups along the way, such as man ruining the terrain added with nature's own disasters. Then there it was, Rose Lake. Its vast carmine color did the few photos that existed injustice. He walked through and past a few clusters of Titan arums, wrinkling his face in disgust. A worn dirt road winding through the drooping branches of weeping willow trees, their leaves brushing against his shoulders as he passed. This had to be it, right? Trudging down the path, daylight, now casting warm orange down behind the trees and mountains. Dakari watched as solar lights slowly began to light the way. Off in the distance he could make out log cabin houses came into view. He breathed out a sigh of relief, ready to rest. Dirt soon turned into gravel and lamp posts flickered. A man sitting on the steps of one of the cabins stood up. The expression on his face was one of alarm. How did he find this place? The man said to himself, going down the set of stairs to cut Dakari off from going any further. "Hello there." The young man waved with a smile on his face. "You need to leave now," the man whispered urgently to Dakari. A pair of firm hands placed themselves onto Dakari's shoulders as he looked at the man, confused.
Is this place, kid? You know about it, sure, but why?
The man looked around him, not at anyone. When he followed the man's gaze, he saw his own shadow on the ground begin to wither and writhe, holding its head. "Get inside." He was urged, being pulled up the stairs, almost tripping a couple of times before making it inside. The door shut behind them, and both stood in a dim-lit living room. "What was that?" Dakari blurted, dropping his bag down, watching the man begin pace. "Before I even answer you, what are you doing here?" Pointing at the young man, and then to his pack. "Do not tell me you are some kind of urban explorer wanting an adventure. For what? To take few pictures for your blog post about this place for a few months of fame?" He huffed. Dakari was silent, his head bowed in shame, as he realized he had been found out. "You have got to be fucking kidding me." The man rubbed a hand over his face with a sigh. In fact, Dakari was not kidding, but after what he saw outside, he wished was. His heart raced as he tried to process what he just saw. Salem, the man who brought him inside, sat on a plaid couch across from the entryway. No longer able to contain his curiosity, Dakari asked, "What was that?" He raked a hand through his hair, motioning towards the closed door of the cabin. Salem looked at the crackling fire burning brightly in the wood stove and replied, "The first mayor of this town, my great-grandfather, made a pact with something, a dark force that has hunted this town and its people ever since. Since then, the future generations have suffered because of it." What exactly was this dark force that hunted Ambermorn? Was it a spirit, a curse, or something even more sinister? This information wasn't mentioned on any online forum he ever came across. Noticing the look on Dakari's face, Salem spoke up. "You're the first person to visit here in 10 years. The last person my father turned away at the entrance, telling them to never speak of finding this town. Well, that would certainly explain why no pictures of Ambermorn exist," Dakari thought to himself. Salem knew he had to get this inexperienced urban explorer out of Ambermorn by morning, since the weather was supposed to be overcast. By using the overcast sky as a shield, Dakari shouldn't cast a shadow and thus be safe in theory. "You'll stay here tonight, and in the morning you should leave," said the man, standing and looking directly at Dakari. "Please, don't tell anyone you found this place. It's for your own safety and theirs." The younger man was reluctant. He had traveled a long way to see if Ambermorn really existed, only to be told to forget about it. Dakari clenched a hand at his side, feeling the weight of Salem's words. He would go along with it for now, but he was determined to bring back proof no matter the cost. Salem showed his guest to a room. "I never got your name." Dakari." He offered a hand to the other male, who gave a nod. "Salem, I apologize if I were to shake your hand. It would welcome you as part of the town, putting you in danger." Dazed, Dakari lowered his hand. "Why, yeah, no problem," though he didn't exactly understand the reason. He figured it had to do with the pact. Now alone, Dakari noticed that the windows were patched with dark UV film, blocking out any light from getting inside. Thinking back, all the windows in the living room had been the same. Even the other houses had blacked out windows. Why were they trying to keep the sunlight from getting inside? Or was it to keep something out? Dakari laid down, his eyes beginning to close. Outside, at the edge of the forest, an immense shape, made of shadow and smoke like dying embers, long and crooked limbs, its fingers tapering into pale bone. No eyes marked its face, only a void where those features should be. It moved into the middle of the town square, letting out a vexed howl. Salem bolted upright, listening to the heavy strides resonating outside. Had it sensed an outsider was here? Of course it knew, because once Dakari stepped foot inside Ambermorn, his shadow alerted the Jacknook. Salem left his bedroom, walking into the living room, where Dakari stood at the front door. "Get away from the door," the man spat lowly. "What's out there?" Dakari asked, looking at Salem over his shoulder as the man yanked him towards the middle of the room. Salem took a deep breath and exhaled before answering the Jacknook. There was a pause between them before Dakari inquired, "What is the Jacknook?" "That thing lumbering around outside, looking for you," refuted the man, motioning his hand towards the door, more at the sound of the creature lumbering around outside. So why exactly was Jacknook looking for Dakari? The younger man let out a nervous, restrained laugh. "After me? What for?" he probed. "Why else would it be after you, other than for your shadow?" Salem retorted. Dakari recalled to when he first arrived, and how his shadow withered and writhed, holding its own head, as if it was being ripped away from his body. Why did the Jacknook want his shadow? And what would happen to him if it were able to get a hold of him? As if reading his mind, Salem opened his mouth to speak, when the thudding of heavy footsteps and a vexing howl caused the entire door to rattle. It knew that Dakari was here. Where should he go, knowing it was too late to leave the town now? Salem racked his brain on what to do next. He knew that the younger man wouldn't make it out of the town. Dakari would be stuck here just like everyone else. Yet he wanted to give the younger man a chance to try. Placing a hand onto Dakari's shoulder, motioning with his eyes towards the door in the kitchen. This door would put him directly in front of the forest. Without hesitation, the younger man went to the door, gradually opening it, and out into the crisp night air. The vexing howl rung through the air again. Heart-pounding, Dakari sprinted into the mass of trees, gravel crunching under his feet. The ground shook along with thunderous rushing of hooved feet behind him. The Jacknook knew where Dakari was chasing him, and soon he would have nowhere else to run, hiding behind a massive overgrowth. The younger man watched as Jaskinu came into his field of vision. Dakari's eyes widened, seeing the creature for himself. It sniffed the air, getting dangerously close. If only he had grabbed something to use as a weapon before leaving the cabin. Would weapons work on Jaskinu? He wondered if anyone had ever tried to fight against the Jakna. Of course, if someone had found a way, then the monster wouldn't be here still terrorizing travelers. A distorted roar from above him made Dakari freeze, body shaking as he slowly looked up. The Jaknook let out a low growl, reaching down to grasp him with pale bony fingertips. If its maw were able to, it would be upturned into a sinister smile. That is, if a bloody, oversized ibex skull could, with its lack of skin. Dakari was snatched up by the front collar of his shirt, then dragged back to Ambermorn. Once in the center, Jaknook held him up high. Light from Ambermorn's street lamps cascaded onto Dakari's back, his shadow cast onto the ground below. A dark chuckle escaped Jaknook as its smoky body pulled Dakari's towards it. The shadow shook and flickered like TV static. "Stop!" Salem yelled, running to them. Shaken Jeffnu got its attention on him. "He isn't part of this town. You must let him go." The Jaknook shook its head. "That deal no longer applies." Salem paled as the monster put its focus back onto Dakari, who struggled to get free. The man could only watch helplessly as the shadow was ripped away from the younger man. It became part of Jognook's body, swirling and twisting into shape, the skin underneath burning like embers. Having gotten what it wanted and dropping Dakari onto the ground, Jognook turned towards the forest and disappeared among the sea of trees. When he hit the ground with a thud, a ringing in his ears started. What was going to happen to him now that his shadow was gone? Did this mean he was cursed? If he tried to leave Ambermorn again, would he turn into something that was no longer human? All these questions he asked himself began to make his head spin, so he closed his eyes. Dakari just needed some rest. When he woke up, he would tell Salem that he decided to stay. Maybe the two of them could find a way to break the curse on Ambermorn and its people. After all, there had to be some way of escaping this place and put an end to the Jaknook for good. "I think my mom's an alien." The hum was back, a low thrumming that vibrated in my bones. It had started subtly, a background noise I could almost ignore, like a distant electrical transformer. But lately, it was growing, becoming insistent, demanding attention, just like before, just like every time they came. Ever since that night when I was 7, the night the lights took me, things hadn't been right. It wasn't a clear memory, more like fragments of a dream. A jumble of sensations, weightlessness, cold metal, a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. I woke up with a mark behind my ear, a small raised scar that my parents dismissed as a scratch. They told me it was a dream. Everyone did, but I knew something had happened. We moved to Iowa shortly after. Dad's dream, he called it, his ancestral land. All I knew was it was the middle of nowhere, miles of cornfields stretching in every direction, swallowing the horizon. I missed my friends, my life, back in the city. This farm, this isolation, it felt like a punishment. The hum started around then too, or maybe I just started noticing it more in the quiet. It was a lonely kind of quiet, the kind that amplifies every creak of the old farmhouse, every rustle of the corn stalks. The years passed, and the memory faded, becoming a hazy, unsettling dream. But the fear remained, a low, constant hum beneath the surface of my life. Sometimes, I'd catch a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye, a flicker of light, a shadow that moved too quickly. I'd hear a strange rustling in the cornfields at night, a sound that wasn't the wind. And then there were the animals. It started subtly. A chicken found dead in the coop, seemingly untouched. Then a calf, its skin, wrong. It was like it had been turned inside out, the raw flesh exposed, no sign of predators. The sheriff dismissed it as some kind of freak accident, but I knew it was them. The way the other animals acted too, that unsettling quiet, the way they huddled together, their eyes wide with fear. It was like they knew something was coming. Then when I was 16, the dreams returned, clearer this time, more vivid, more real. I saw them. Those things. They weren't just vaguely octopus-like anymore. They were nightmarish parodies of cephalopods, bloated and grotesque. Their skin wasn't just shimmering. It was slick, oily black, like a freshly spilled oil slick, reflecting a sickly moon. And the suckers, God, the suckers, they weren't just smooth discs. They were lined with tiny chitinous hooks that scraped against my skin in the dreams, leaving phantom sensations that lingered even after I woke. Their tentacles, they writhed and pulsed with a sickening life of their own. They weren't just limbs, they were prehensile horrors, tipped with razor-sharp barbs that dripped with some viscous, iridescent fluid. They stretched and contorted in ways that defied physics, reaching into places they shouldn't, touching me in ways that made my stomach churn even years later. Their eyes, multifaceted and cold, saw right through me, stripping away my defenses, exposing my deepest fears, my most vulnerable shames. They didn't take me then, not physically, but they were there, in my dreams, probing my mind, planting images, whispering suggestions. I woke up each morning with a feeling of violation, a sense that something had been taken from me, something corrupted. The hum intensified after that. It was almost constant now, a low thrumming that seemed to vibrate in sync with my heartbeat. The bruise on my arm reappeared, the dark, purplish-black mark with veins that snaked beneath the skin like blackened roots, pulsing faintly. Exploratory surgery revealed a foreign biological substance present within the tissue. It wasn't just in me, it was part of me, woven into the muscle and nerve fibers like some alien parasite. Analysis confirmed the presence of nucleic acids, but the structure and composition were inconsistent with known terrestrial DNA. It was wrong. The strands were too long, too complex, coiling in ways that defied our understanding of biology. Under high magnification, the cells seemed to flicker, almost as if they were phasing in and out of reality. It was as if they belonged to some other dimension, someplace beyond our comprehension, and it was spreading throughout my entire body, yet no effects. Other test subjects that had samples of this DNA in them. Upon death, the human body, so fragile and dependent on the delicate balance of Earth's environment, undergoes rapid and dramatic changes. Without the atmospheric pressure to contain them, the body's internal fluids begin to boil and vaporize, a phenomenon known as ebulism. The lack of oxygen leads to a swift loss of consciousness, and within minutes, brain death. The skin becomes severely sunburned and begins to swell. It's a gruesome process, a swift and brutal reminder of our terrestrial limitations, which is literally the same as dying in outer space. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sunburns? In a lab, it's not the sun as we know it, that big ball of gas, billions of miles away. Think of the sun as a massive energy source. It emits energy in many forms, including light and radiation. That radiation, specifically ultraviolet UV radiation, is what causes sunburns. Well, this DNA, it seems to be acting as a conduit for a similar kind of energy, only it's not coming from outer space. It's coming from somewhere else. This foreign DNA is somehow converting something within me, some kind of energy, into something that's mimicking the effects of solar radiation, right down to the cellular level. At least, that's what the scientists and doctors told us. But then again, how does this all help me? This is actually fucked. Ben, Dad, he tried to protect me. He saw the lights that night, the same lights that took me when I was 7. He grabbed his shotgun, his face a mask of fear and determination. "Stay inside, Henry," he yelled, his voice cracking. He ran out into the yard, just as the ship descended. I watched from the window, my heart pounding in my chest. The violet light washed over everything, making the cornfield look like it was underwater. Then I saw them, the things. They were even more grotesque than in my dreams. Their tentacles writhed, dripping that iridescent slime. They surrounded Dad, their movements too quick, too fluid. I saw one of them, its tentacles snaking out, forcing something gooey down Dad's throat. He gagged, his body convulsing. Then he went still. "Dad," I screamed, running out of the house. The ship was gone, leaving only the eerie silence and the lingering smell of ozone. Dad lay on the ground, his eyes wide open, staring at nothing. I rushed to him, my hands shaking. "Dad, Dad, can you hear me?" His eyes didn't focus. His skin was clammy, cold. I checked for a pulse, but there was nothing. He was gone. No, I sobbed, pulling his body closer. "Please, Dad, No. Mom came running out, her face pale. Henry, what happened? She whispered, her voice trembling. They, I couldn't speak. I just pointed at Dad. Mom gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Tears streamed down her face. Together we managed to drag his body back into the house. We laid him on the living room floor, covering him with a blanket. Mom sat beside him, rocking back and forth, her sobs filling the room. I sat there too, numb, trying to make sense of what had happened. Then, something moved under the blanket. Dad's hand twitched. Mom and I exchanged a terrified look. His body began to convulse, a sickening shudder running through him. His eyes snapped open, but they were no longer Dad's eyes. They were cold, empty, filled with a malevolent intelligence. He sat up, his head lolling to the side. His mouth opened, and a guttural growl escaped. Dad, I whispered, my voice trembling. He lunged. He moved with an unnatural speed, his body contorting in ways that were physically impossible. He wasn't Dad anymore. He was a thing, using Dad's body as a shell. He grabbed Mom, throwing her against the wall. She screamed, her arm twisting at an unnatural angle. I ran to the shed, adrenaline coursing through me. I grabbed the axe, its weight heavy in my hands. I ran back into the house, my heart pounding in my chest. He was coming for me. I swung the axe, the blade sinking deep into his shoulder. He didn't even flinch. He just kept coming, his eyes fixed on me, filled with a terrifying hunger. I fought, scratching, clawing, desperate to survive. But it was like fighting a machine, something relentless and unstoppable. I was both injured, bleeding, terrified. Then Mom screamed, Henry, the axe. You have to. I knew what she meant. They aren't just dead, Henry. They're repurposed. I knew what she meant. They aren't just dead, Henry. They're repurposed. Her words echoed in my mind, a chilling mantra that fueled the rising panic. This wasn't just about survival. It was about desecration, preventing them from using Dad's body any longer. I swung the axe again, this time aiming for his head. The blade connected with a sickening thunk, a jarring impact that vibrated through the handle and into my bones. His head snapped to the side, a wet, sickening crack accompanying the blow. He fell to the floor, his body jerking and twitching in a grotesque parody of life. A dark, crimson stain bloomed on the floor beneath him. But it wasn't enough. He was still moving. That alien presence, that thing inside him, clung to life with a tenacity that defied reason. I understood. We had to go further. We had to violate. The next few minutes were a chaotic dance of desperation and dread. The axe, heavy and slick in my hands, became an instrument of necessity. Each swing was a desperate act, a visceral struggle against the unnatural force that animated Dad's body. I focused on the mechanics, the swing, the impact, trying to block out the horror of what I was doing. The metallic tang of blood filled the air, thick and cloying, mingling with the strange, almost sweet, scent of that iridescent slime. Bits of Dad flew with each swing, spattering the walls and floor. I saw bone, white and stark against the crimson. Severed limbs twitched on the floor, fingers still clenching and unclenching. Even after, the flesh seemed to writhe, as if trying to reassemble itself, pulled by his own blood, congealing and clinging to tendons and muscle, a grotesque, biological imperative, driven by the alien presence within. We buried the pieces separately in the cornfield, under the pale light of the moon. We didn't speak. We couldn't. We were broken, shattered, haunted by what I had done. Mom was never the same after that. The grief was a physical thing, a weight that bent her over, stole the light from her eyes. She started drinking, heavily, whiskey, mostly. It numbed the pain, she said, but it also made her mean. She'd look at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of grief and resentment. It's your fault, she'd slur. They came for you. Your father, he sacrificed himself for you. Now, at 33, the hum is back, louder than ever, a constant thrumming in my bones. And the lights, they're not just lights anymore. They're like nothing I've ever seen, even in my nightmares. You're a sickly, pulsating violet, shifting and swirling in the sky, like living things. They don't just illuminate, they probe, they pierce the darkness, casting long, distorted shadows that dance and writhe like mocking figures. They seem to have a life of their own. These lights, almost sentient, watching, waiting. One night, she was on one of her drunken stupors again. But this hostility was expected. It was Dad's death date after all. I was grieving too, but for once, I needed to make a stand for myself. "It wasn't my fault," I shouted, my voice cracking. Mom just stared at me, her eyes bloodshot and unfocused. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat on the table between us, the amber liquid sloshing precariously. It was the same argument we'd had 100 times, the same accusations, the same raw gaping wound of grief that never seemed to heal. It had started, like it always did lately, with Mom staring at Dad's picture on the mantelpiece, a flicker of something dark and accusing in her eyes. Then the whispers began, barely audible at first, about how Dad had died because of me, how I was cursed, a bringer of darkness. "He died because of you," she slurred, pointing a shaky finger at my chest. "You brought this on us." "That's not true," I insisted, but my words felt hollow, even to my own ears. "They came for Dad too. Don't you understand? He was trying to protect me." She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "Protect you. He died because of you," she repeated, her voice laced with bitterness. "You were always different," she whispered, her gaze drifting to some unseen point in the distance. "A strange child. And now, look what's happened." She gestured vaguely around the room, littered with empty bottles and overflowing ashtrays. "Your father is dead. And this, I gotta deal with this shit." "Mom, please," I begged, tears stinging my eyes. "I'm scared too. I miss him too." But tonight was different. Something inside me snapped. Years of bottled-up frustration, of guilt and fear and the crushing weight of her accusations, finally boiled over. "Actually, no, fuck this," I roared, slamming my fist on the table, making the whiskey bottles jump. "In not taking this anymore. It wasn't my fault. I didn't ask for any of this." She stared at me, momentarily stunned by my outburst. Then, her face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little," she started, but I cut her off. "Ungrateful?" I shouted. "I watched them kill Dad. I had to. The memory of that night, the axe, the blood, the sickening crunch of bone, flooded back, making my stomach churn. And you blame me. You push me away. What kind of mother are you?" She lunged at me, her nails raking down my face. But it wasn't like fingernails at all. It felt like talons, sharp and impossibly strong, tearing through skin and muscle. I recoiled, the searing pain a white-hot flash across my face. My vision blurred, and I felt something warm and wet trickling down my cheek. It wasn't just scratches. It was worse. Strips of skin hung loose, peeled back like the rind of a fruit. And then, a sickening crunch, a blinding pain that made me scream. She had gotten my eye. I stumbled back, crashing against the wall, my hand instinctively reaching for the gaping wound on my face. She stumbled too, falling against the wall with a sickening thump. The whiskey bottle slipped from her grasp, shattering on the floor, the amber liquid splashing across the dusty boards like spilled blood. A strange scent filled the air, acrid and metallic, nothing like her usual perfume. It wasn't just body odor, it was something stronger, something familiar yet unsettlingly different. It clung to the back of my throat, making me gag. It was her, but more. This was the first time she'd ever laid a hand on me. And somehow, this human violence, this raw animalistic rage in her eyes, she was starting to scare me more than the fucking aliens. "Get out," she screamed, her voice raw with fury. "Get out of my house." The smell of whiskey and stale cigarettes clung to her, a constant reminder of the woman she used to be, the warm, loving mother who had vanished along with Dad. I wandered into town, a ghost in my own life. I had no money, no food, no place to go. The townspeople eyed me with suspicion, whispering behind their hands. I was the boy from the farm, the one whose father had died, violently. They knew something was wrong, something dark and unsettling. I could see it in their averted gazes, in the way they crossed the street to avoid me. Before leaving the farm, I'd managed to call the ambulance, a frantic, whispered plea for help that felt utterly inadequate in the face of what had happened. The ER had been a blur of antiseptic smells and hurried questions. I'd lied, Of course, told them I'd been attacked by some animal outside. A wild dog maybe, or a coyote. They'd patched me up, stitched the torn flesh on my face. But the look in the doctor's eyes, he hadn't believed me. No one would. The hum, I could still feel it. A low vibration beneath my skin. A constant reminder of the horror I carried inside. I slept in the park, huddled under a thin blanket. The hum a constant reminder of the terror that was coming. It was a cold, gnawing hum, a vibration that resonated deep within me, like a tuning fork struck in the hollow of my bones. It was the sound of them, the sound of the void. Then, I met Silas. It was in the park, a rare sunny afternoon. I was sitting on a bench, staring blankly ahead, trying to disappear into the anonymity of the crowd, when I saw him. Silas. He was an older man, with a shock of white hair and eyes that seemed to pierce right through you. He wasn't just looking at the sky like other people might, admiring the clouds or whatever. He was searching it, scanning it, almost like he was looking for something specific. But it wasn't just the way he looked. It was what he was doing with his hands. He held them up, palms out, as if he was trying to catch something, or maybe block something. It was strange, unsettling, something no other old man in the park was doing. It was the kind of thing people whispered about, the kind of thing that earned you the label of crazy. But there was something about his intensity, his focus. It resonated with me. He was a recluse, living in a dilapidated cabin on the outskirts of town, with a reputation for being eccentric, a local historian with a fascination for the unexplained. But he wasn't crazy. He was just different. He saw the world in a way that others didn't, a way that deep down made sense to me. He listened to my story, his eyes wide, with a strange mixture of fear and excitement. He didn't dismiss me as delusional, like everyone else. He understood. He knew about the farm, about the lights, about the things that happened in Iowa. The umbral beings, he whispered, his voice hushed with reverence and dread. They're ancient, powerful. They travel between dimensions, between times. They are not of this world, not truly. They've been here for centuries, Silas continued, his voice raspy, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. Long before your family, long before this town, even. They've been observing, waiting. He gestured with a gnarled finger, tracing patterns in the dust on his cluttered table. They're not interested in our technology, our resources. They're interested in us. What do they want? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Silas leaned forward, his eyes glinting in the dim light of his cabin. That's the question, isn't it? Some say they're harbingers, messengers of something greater, something beyond. He paused, a shiver running down his spine. Others believe there's something far worse, that they're as shepherds, guiding us towards some unknown destination. He told me about the local legends, about the creatures that had been seen in the area for decades. He spoke of grotesque figures, their forms shifting and indistinct, their presence heralded by the hum and the violet lights. He said they were drawn to the farm, drawn to me. He said my altered DNA, that thing they put inside me, it was like a beacon, calling them back. Silas had a plan, a crazy plan. He wanted to use me as bait. He thought if we could lure them out, we could finally understand what they wanted, what they were doing. He believed they were connected to something vast, something ancient, something that existed beyond human comprehension. He called it the awakening. They're not just aliens, Silas explained, his voice hushed with awe. They exist outside of our linear time. They slip between moments, between realities. They're what some call prophets of simulation, beings who manipulate the very fabric of existence. They travel not through galaxies, but through matrices, through layers of reality, between moments in time. They are beyond our understanding. I was terrified, but I was also desperate. I needed answers. I needed to know why they chose me, why they destroyed my family, why they filled my life with a dread that never left me, a fear that burrowed into my soul and made a home there. So, tonight, we're going back to the cornfield, Silas said, his voice barely a whisper. He stared out the window, his gaze fixed on the darkening sky. We're going to face them. I knew who he meant. The aliens, the things that had haunted his life for decades, the things that had taken his family. You think they'll be there? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Silas nodded slowly, a single tear tracing a path down his weathered cheek. "They took my wife," he said, his voice thick with grief, each word a heavy weight. "And my daughter, Emily. They never found her." He turned, and for a moment I saw the raw, unfiltered pain that had driven him for all these years. "Do you know what it's like, Henry?" he asked, his voice cracking. To see what they did to her. It wasn't just death. It was violation. The pull, it was so strong. They ripped her out of her skin, like pulling a sock off, inside out. That's what fell on me, just the skin, a wet, bloody thing." He closed his eyes, his face contorting in a silent scream. "But that wasn't even the worst part. The screaming. Henry, I can still hear her screaming, even after her skin was gone. Her body, it just combusted, exploded, like a balloon filled with blood. Just poof. A mist, a red rain, all over me." He opened his eyes again, and they were filled with a desperate plea. And then, the men in black. They were there so fast, like they knew, like they were waiting. They told me, they warned me to keep quiet, said it was for my own good, for Emily's memory. But how can I honor her memory by pretending she just disappeared? His voice dropped to a whisper. "Emily's gone, Henry. I know that. But maybe I can find some answers. Maybe I can finally understand why." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate resolve. And maybe, he added, a chilling edge to his voice, maybe I can make them pay. He paused, a dark premonition hanging heavy in the air. "But I have a feeling," he finished, "that this time I won't be coming back." The cornstalks tower around us, a whispering labyrinth in the inky blackness. It's a different kind of dark out here, a thick, suffocating darkness that swallows the light of our flashlights whole. The air hangs heavy and still, charged with an unnatural electricity that makes the hairs on my arms stand on end. Above, the stars glitter like a million icy eyes, but it's hard to tell which ones are stars and which ones aren't. The silence is unnerving too. Not a cricket's chirp, not a rustle of leaves, just the faint, almost imperceptible hum that vibrates deep in my bones. It's as if the whole world is holding its breath. Then the lights appear. They descend silently, impossibly, piercing the darkness like malevolent stars falling from the sky. They're too bright, too focused, too wrong. And then they take Silas. It happens so fast. One moment he's beside me, his hand gripping my arm. The next he's gone. There's no scream, no struggle, just a sudden, violent snap as he's yanked upwards, vanishing into the blinding light, as if he's been plucked from the earth by an invisible hand. It's like he was never even there. But I can hear him. He screams, a raw, animalistic sound that's cut short as he's yanked upwards, his body twisting and contorting in the violet light. He's silhouetted against the underside of the craft, a writhing, struggling form that's pulled inside with terrifying speed. Then, silence, an unnerving, absolute silence that's broken only by the low hum of the ship. My breath hitches in my throat. I know I should run. Every instinct screams at me to turn and flee, to put as much distance as possible between myself and whatever horror just claimed Silas. But my feet are rooted to the spot. I can't move. I'm transfixed, paralyzed by a terror so profound it transcends fear. It's a morbid curiosity, a dreadful fascination with the unknown that keeps me rooted to the spot. The ship remains hovering above the cornfield for what feels like an eternity, the violet light pulsating like a diseased heart. Then, with a sickening thud, something falls from the sky. It lands in the cornfield, a few feet away from me. It's Silas. But it's not Silas. Not anymore. His skin, it's like it's been peeled back, revealing the raw, glistening muscle beneath. His eyes are gone, just empty sockets staring up at the sky. And from his mouth, a thick, viscous ooze spills out, shimmering in the moonlight. He's still alive, somehow, his chest rising and falling in shallow, ragged breaths. But he's not Silas. He's a puppet, a grotesque husk, animated by something alien. A low growl rumbles from his throat, a sound that's not human. He tries to sit up, his movements jerky and unnatural. He looks at me, or rather the thing inside him looks at me, and a wave of pure, unadulterated terror washes over me. Those empty sockets, they see me. They see through me. I back away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I want to run, but my legs feel like lead. I know, with a chilling certainty, that I'm next. And then, I hear it. A whisper in the wind, a voice that's both familiar and utterly alien. It's my mother's voice, but twisted, distorted, corrupted. Henry, it whispers, come home. I don't know what's waiting for me at the farmhouse, but I know with a certainty that chills me to the bone, that whatever it is, it's not human, and it's waiting for me. It's always been waiting for me. I run, my heart pounding. I don't look back. I run as fast as my legs will carry me. The image of Silas' mutilated body, and the sound of my mother's corrupted voice driving me on. I run until I collapse, gasping for breath, my lungs burning. But the voice, it lingers. Henry, come home. It's a siren's call, a twisted promise of comfort that tugs at the frayed edges of my sanity. I know it's a trap, but the loneliness, the gnawing ache for some semblance of family, is too strong to resist. I force myself to my feet and start walking back towards the farmhouse, back towards the darkness. The house is quiet when I arrive. No lights, no sound, just the hum, louder now, a constant vibration that seems to emanate from the very walls. I push the door open and step inside. Mom, I call out, my voice trembling. Henry, her voice. It sounds normal, relieved. I'm home, I say, stepping further into the house. The moonlight spills through the living room window, casting long, eerie shadows. Everything looks normal, almost too normal. I'm in here, honey, she calls, her voice coming from the kitchen. I'm making some tea. Come on in. I walk towards the kitchen, my footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. Mom, I start, but the words catch in my throat. She's there, standing by the stove, her back to me. She's wearing her old robe, the one she always wore when she was reading before bed. She's humming softly to herself. Mom, I say again, my voice barely a whisper. She turns and smiles. It's Mom's smile, or at least, it looks like Mom's smile. It's almost perfect. Henry, she says, her voice warm and welcoming. I'm so glad you're back. I missed you, I say, my voice choked with emotion. I missed you too, honey, she replies, her eyes glistening in the dim light. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I take a step towards her, and she reaches out to take my hand. As our fingers brush, I notice something off. Her skin, it's too smooth, too seamless. And her eyes, they're Mom's eyes, but they're also different, colder, more distant. The hum intensifies, vibrating through the floorboards, through my bones. Henry, come home. I take another step back, my heart pounding in my chest. Mom, what's wrong with your skin? Her smile falters, just for a moment. Then, it widens, becoming something predatory. Nothing, honey, she says, her voice now a low, guttural purr. Everything is perfect. And then right before my eyes, she peels it off. It's like watching someone shuck an ear of corn, only instead of kernels, it's flesh. Mom's skin, perfectly preserved, comes away from her body in one sickening piece, revealing the thing beneath. It's not human. It's not even close. Its form shimmers, the edges blurring, shifting. It's something alien, something monstrous. The last thing I hear is the hum, growing louder, drowning out everything else. Then, darkness. A walk in the woods. Before you read, I'm a new writer, and this is my first story. If you have any tips for writing horror stories, LMK. It was a Saturday morning. I woke up excited. Today I was going over to my girlfriend's house. I woke up around 6 a.m., took a shower, and watched some YouTube. It was around 12 p.m. when my girlfriend's mom arrived to pick me up. We sat in the car catching up, chatting and laughing. When we arrived at her house, we sat and watched our favorite shows. After a while, we got out of her bed and relaxed with her brother and his girlfriend. We watched the first Conjuring movie. I felt like a real man having her hold me when she got scared. It was nice. We decided we wanted to go on a walk, just me and her, as we made our way to a nearby park. I got this weird feeling we were being watched. It was really unsettling. The cold wind felt like the cold breath of someone behind me watching, waiting. The wind had a discomforting feeling to it, as if you could hear whispers in the passing air. Finally, we had arrived at the park. I felt her hand tense up holding mine. She seemed to be scared too. We walked to this park bench, sat down and held hands. As we sat down, I went in for a kiss, but was interrupted. From the woods behind us, I heard a glass-breaking scream like someone was being brutally stabbed. Reluctantly, I walk over to the woods. What are you doing? Are you some kind of idiot, Isaac? You hear a scream and you follow it. Jaden seemed annoyed, rightfully so, but I couldn't just leave knowing someone was hurt and needed us. What if it's just some old lady who fell and broke her leg or something? We should go check it out. Reluctantly, Jaden followed Isaac into the woods. As we stepped into the woods, the sticks like broken bones cracking under our feet, the wind like the murmurs of a distant conversion. We felt this strong presence, as if your parents were staring at you but you didn't quite know it. We got deeper into the woods, and I was starting to regret my choice to come in the first place. Out of nowhere, coming as a complete surprise, we had found the source of the scream. We now really wished we hadn't. As you look up at this maybe 70 feet tall pine tree starting at the very top and leading to the bottom was a trail of blood and organs, like a balloon full of red food dye had been popped, laying at the bottom of the tree a mangled mess of the corpse of whatever had screamed in the first place. We didn't know why or how, but what we did know is we had to get the fuck out of there. As we booked it through the woods, we felt like we weren't alone anymore. No, we knew we weren't. Footsteps like hammers hitting the ground followed behind us. As we ran, we made a terrifying discovery. We went too deep. We were lost. We struggled to get away from whatever was following us. When we felt it was safe, we stopped and hid in some shrubs under a tree. When sorry, it's all my fault. I'm gonna get us killed, Isaac said through tear-filled eyes. Look at me and shut up. We are gonna survive, me, and you are gonna get home and we are gonna be fine. I just need you to be strong. Isaac looked up, a newfound strength in him. They got up and began looking for a way out. As we marched through the woods, we heard the thing that was following us again. But this time, not only was it heard, but it was seen. As we passed a tree, we looked back to see this monster. A mass of flesh like broken bones and flesh sewn to a clump of organs, at least 7 feet tall in height. Jaden stepped on a stick, cracking and breaking. Just a little too loud. Oh fuck. The beast began charging us, damn near knocking over the trees in its wake. Isaac and Jaden ran desperately trying to escape its grasp, but they weren't fast enough. Isaac's feet were pulled underneath him, and he was almost dragged away, but Jaden managed to grab him. Luckily, they were next to a canyon in the woods, and the beast fell back tumbling like a rock down a staircase. Isaac and Jaden kept running on foot, only stopping when Isaac passed out. He fell to the ground too weak to stand. It was probably because of the adrenaline, but they only just noticed a giant gash in his leg. It was bad. You could see bone. It wasn't looking good. I'm not gonna sit here and let you die. Not when I'm the one who brought you here. Just leave without me. He'll yell and make a distraction. Maybe I can't live, but you can, Isaac said through labored breaths. No, Jaden snapped. I will not leave you here like roadkill. We are leaving together. She shed a tear, and the guilt for bringing her here only grew. Well then, let's start finding a way out. Isaac and Jaden began to walk again at a slow pace. Isaac was in a lot of pain, each step sending a shooting pain throughout his body. Isaac leaned on Jaden for support. He was sure to fall without her. They tried to head back in the direction of where the park was. Just as things got more desperate, Jaden had an idea. We could follow the moon back. It had been to the north, and we began in that direction. Not too far from the tree with the body, they were closing in on the park. Just as the tree with the body was in sight, Isaac collapsed again. I won't let you die. Please leave and live. If not for me, then do it for you. Isaac was a mess of tears, a husk covered in the guilt of bringing her here. How many times do I have to say this? I will not leave you now. Stand up. We are leaving. They both cried. Hey, Jaden, Isaac asked. Yeah, she replied. Can I hug you? If I die, I want to hold you one last time, he said as a tear ran down his dirt-covered face, leaves and pine needles trapped in his hair. You can hug me when we get out of here. Now get up. I won't ask again. As they approached the tree with the body, a horrific discovery was made. The body was gone. All that was left was a clump of teeth, blood, and stomach bile. They look into the distance. Now in the foreground was two massive beasts standing at 7 feet tall. As they looked closer, they didn't believe their eyes. The second beast was the body of the woman, like a puppeteered corpse stretched to 7 feet tall. Isaac held Jaden's mouth, worried a scream may leave her lips. That thing, it made another one. She looked down at my leg. You don't think it will happen to you, will it? She asked with a wave of worry, washing her face. I don't know, but let's leave before we find out. We made our way past the tree where the body was found. We were about a 10-minute walk away from the entrance of the woods. As we grew near, the last thing they wanted to hear began, not just one set of footsteps, but two, a rhythmic beating in the soil, a song that would mean the end of both of us. As these monsters grew closer, Isaac grew desperate. He pushed Jaden to keep going and ran in another direction, hitting trees and throwing rocks as he went. His plan worked. Jaden was free to run the exit to the woods, and the light shining from the nearby street pole from the park was the only guide out. Jaden stopped, looked back, and began calling for Isaac. Isaac, are you okay? Hurry, please. I won't leave you. You could hear a faint yelling in the distance. You need to go. It's all gonna be Omok. He was abruptly interrupted. All that could be heard was a scream and a splat like rotten fruit slammed on the concrete. She ran away with tears. In her eyes, she had feared the worst, and rightfully so. Isaac's words playing on a loop in her head. Live, if not for me, then for you. She feared he was gone. Just as she reached the park, she looked back, and that same glass-breaking scream from the bench was heard again. But this time there were 3 of them. They got Isaac. He was gone. I don't know what happened, how it did, or why, but what I do know is that's the last time I take a walk in the woods. A murder that haunted a town. The formerly tranquil town of Millfield, nestled within the serene landscape of the American Midwest, was irrevocably changed on April 4, 2015, by a sequence of events that would challenge the very fabric of the community's peaceful existence. Known for its strong social cohesion and the picturesque beauty of its environment, Millfield became the unexpected setting for a somber saga that intertwined the grim realities of homicide, treachery, and paranormal occurrences. Then one day that all changed when the disappearance of Emily Thompson occurred out of nowhere. As a highly esteemed nurse and devoted wife, whose sudden absence sent ripples of anxiety through the community, as her husband, Daniel Thompson, a young academic of exceptional promise at the local institution of higher learning, was the one to first raise the alarm regarding her whereabouts. He claimed she had decided to take an unexpected vacation, an assertion that seemed incongruous with her well-known character, as she was recognized for her meticulous planning and steadfast nature. Daniel grew increasingly paranoid and erratic as he looked pale and gaunt, and lost his focus on his studies right away as he began to withdraw from his family, and was seen frequently in the company of individuals whose reputations were less than commendable. Despite the growing whispers of his potential engagement in illicit activities, the local law enforcement remained hamstrung due to a lack of concrete evidence. The friends of Emily noticed that an odor was coming from their backyards, and when checked, there was nothing there. It had a foul stench of death and human flesh decaying. Following the initial police investigation into the mystery smell, they conducted a thorough investigation, which came up empty. Baffled by this, they tried the cadaver dogs to search the area without success. It was in the midst of a scorching July that the first tangible clue was unearthed, when neighbors of the Thompson household were awakened by disembodied screaming and gurgling noises. And once again, as a search, nothing was found. Not even a drop of blood was found outside the house. The local authorities were notified once more, but their efforts yielded no immediate results. The town's tranquility was shattered when, on a fateful day in August, a neighbor reported an eerie presence in the Thompson home. A woman dressed in white roaming the streets at night and saying, "Help me," in a calm voice that seemed to echo through the quiet streets. The police were called to the scene and found no evidence of anyone being there. As the days grew shorter and the nights colder, the whispers grew louder, until one evening, a group of local teenagers claimed to have seen the ghostly apparition of Emily walking down the street repeating the words, "Help me," and then disappeared into thin air as they were left speechless at the sight, then ran away in terror, prompting the police to look into the matter, and didn't find anything, once again leaving the residents speechless. The grief and horror that engulfed Millfield upon the discovery of Emily's purse at the park, which was a place she frequented, were unparalleled. The purse contained her identification, her nurse's badge, and a hastily scribbled note that read, "I am trapped and need help." As this note was so distressing that it sent the town into a frenzy of fear and concern, as the residents began to take matters into their own hands and search for Emily, or what was left of her, knowing she wasn't alive at this point. Their first real break in the case came in early September 15th, when Daniel was apprehended inside a bar after getting into a fight with 3 men. The bar was located in a neighboring town, where he had attempted to establish a new life under the guise of a different identity. The arresting officers found his behavior suspicious, and upon running a background check, discovered that he was wanted in connection with the disappearance of his wife, Emily Thompson. However, without a body or any other concrete evidence to support the allegations of foul play, Daniel remained a suspect rather than a convict. His behavior grew increasingly erratic and disturbing as he spoke of hearing voices, urging him to do unspeakable things, and of seeing her ghostly visage in the shadows. The town's residents were torn between sympathy for the young man who had lost his best friend and fear of the potential monster he might have become. The case took a dramatic turn when a local psychic claimed to have communicated with Emily's spirit, asserting that she had been brutally murdered by an unseen force and her body hidden somewhere within the town. This revelation fueled the town's burgeoning obsession with the supernatural, and the search for Emily's remains became a quest to lay her spirit, and surprisingly Daniel didn't show up in the reading and was found to be clean of any wrongdoing. In several days, the remains of Emily were found buried in the woods outside of town. The condition of the corpse was consistent with the psychic's description, and the community was left reeling with shock and disbelief that Daniel's DNA was not found on the corpse. In fact, there was something off about it, because on the night of her disappearance, he was at home suddenly getting sick and couldn't breathe, then had to be rushed to the hospital. After further examination of the DNA sample, it concluded that Daniel was not the murderer. The investigation was reopened, and a new suspect came to light. It was revealed that Emily had been seeing someone else, a man who turned out to be Ronnie Holt, who had a history of violence and had been stalking her for months. As the town grappled with the revelation of Emily's infidelity, they were also forced to confront the possibility that their beloved nurse had been leading a double life and keeping this from her husband. The only problem: Ronnie fled town after April 4th, 2015, and had not been seen since, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a community struggling to reconcile the image of the woman they knew with the reality of her tragic fate. As the investigation continued, the police faced a plethora of challenges, including a lack of evidence and the elusiveness of the suspect, who had seemingly vanished without a trace until they found his car abandoned at a rest stop, with a note that said, "I'm not giving yet," and a knife with Emily's DNA on it. For several months there was no sign of Ronnie, but as the snow began to fall in December, a hiker stumbled upon a frozen corpse in a remote area of the forest. It appeared the male victim had succumbed to the harsh elements. The case of Emily Thompson's murder remained unsolved, leaving the people of Millfield to ponder the true nature of the evil that had once dwelled in their midst. However, DNA ruled out that the body did not belong to Ronnie, but a man who suffered a heart attack and succumbed to the elements. Meanwhile, Daniel's mental health deteriorated as he was mumbling about a cabin in the woods several miles out of town. At first, the police did not consider it important until they realized that was the same area where Ronnie's car was found and decided to investigate. They found the cabin abandoned and in disarray with no signs of life. However, they did find a journal belonging to Ronnie detailing his obsession with Emily, his violent tendencies, and his eventual plan to kidnap and kill her. Then he started yelling, "You'll have my final word. Just you wait, bitch," and started vomiting blood that seemed not to come from his stomach or anywhere in his body, which baffled the medical examiner and the police. It was as if his soul was being ripped out of him, and suddenly he collapsed, then hooked up to a ventilator, but his brain activity was off the chart, indicating he was experiencing something beyond human comprehension. As the town was left to mourn the loss of Emily and the destruction of a marriage, and to ponder the possibility that there was more to the story than what had been revealed, the case remained open, with the hope that one day the true events of that fateful night would come to light. But for now, The chilling whispers of the supernatural lingered over Millfield like a shroud, casting a pall of doubt and unease upon the townsfolk, who could not help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of their once idyllic home. The investigation into Emily's murder has become priority number one, including the capture of Ronnie Holt and the truth behind his involvement. But as the months have passed, the case has grown cold, with no new leads or suspects. The townsfolk of Millfield have had to learn to live with the unresolved mystery that has come to define their community, and everybody was afraid that the killer was still among them, as well as the local law enforcement, who were eager to catch this monster, had not given up hope, though, and continues to pursue every avenue of inquiry, no matter how remote or implausible, recognizing that the closure of such a heinous crime is essential, not just for the family of the victim, but for the collective conscience of the town as well. They know that without it, the shadow of doubt and fear will continue to loom over their lives. On October 9th, 2018, Daniel started drawing a map of a town and the wooded area surrounding it, detailing the cabin where he had heard Emily's voice and the place where her body was found. The map was so detailed and accurate that the police could not ignore it, and they decided to conduct a search of the area once again. It was during this search that they found the cabin, and it was in this cabin that they discovered the true horror of what had happened to Emily Thompson. The cabin was adorned with images of Emily and Daniel. It was clear that Ronnie had been living there and had been watching them from afar, but what was most shocking was the altar that he had built in her honor, surrounded by candles and drenched in what appeared to be animal blood. It was a chilling sight that spoke to the depth of his obsession and madness. Within the cabin's walls, they found a hidden chamber, and inside that chamber, they discovered an effigy of Emily's body, perfectly replicated, as if she had been placed there moments after her death. It was a gruesome sight that brought the reality of the case crashing down upon the town, like a ton of bricks. What they found next shocked them. On the table with a fresh plate of food that was recently cooked, they decided to stake out the place until the suspect known as Ronnie Holt came back. With their guns drawn, they surrounded the cabin and waited for the sun to rise. It was then that they saw a figure approach. It was Ronnie, looking much older and weaker than the photos they had of him. He was apprehended with an hour-long barricade situation, and he was brought back to Millfield to face his crimes. During this confrontation, Ronnie started saying that it was not him who committed the crime, but a force that had taken over his body, a demon that had been haunting the woods for centuries, seeking vengeance on unfaithful women and their lovers. He claimed that the demon had made him do it, and that he had been fighting against its control the entire time. The town's residents were torn between disbelief and terror. As they listened to his words, some dismissed them as the desperate ramblings of a madman, while others found themselves questioning the very fabric of their reality. He didn't speak at his interrogation, except when he asked for a lawyer, and when the lawyer came he spoke in a calm and collected manner, explaining that the demon had made him do it, and that it was not his hand that had killed Emily, but the hand of something much darker and more ancient than any of them could ever understand. His words sent a shiver down the spine of even the most seasoned detective. The trial of Ronnie Holt was a media sensation, with journalists and true crime enthusiasts descending upon the small town of Millfield, eager to unravel the tapestry of terror and deceit that had been woven around the case. The defense presented the demonic possession theory as a defense, citing historical cases of similar occurrences and the presence of unexplained phenomena in the area, while the prosecution focused on the cold, hard facts of the case. In the end, the jury found him guilty of murder, despite his claims of supernatural influence, and he was sentenced to life in prison. As the town breathed a collective sigh of relief, the haunting memory of Emily Thompson's tragic demise remained. The depravity of an individual can be of the darkness that can lurk even in the most seemingly innocent of places like a small town. This murder is a terrifying and unspeakable testament to the complexity of human nature and the potential for evil to fester in the most unsuspecting of hearts. It also raises profound questions about the intersection of the supernatural and the rational, questions that may never be fully answered, but that will continue to resonate within the minds of those who dare to ponder them. As for Daniel, he recovered and became a motivational speaker, also a believer in the supernatural, helping those who have suffered losses that seemingly have no explanation. His story is one of resilience and the human spirit's capacity for healing. Though the scars of his past may never fully fade, he has found a way to channel his pain into something positive, serving as a beacon of hope for those who find themselves in the darkest of places. seeking answers to questions that may never be fully understood. In the end, the town of Millfield learned that sometimes the truth is not as simple as it seems, and that the most profound mysteries often lie just beyond the edge of the known world. Later documents were released about the psychological state of Daniel and the psychic, which showed signs of a shared delusion and the possibility of them working together to create this narrative, leaving the town even more confused and questioning the reality of what truly happened to Emily Thompson. The case remains open to interpretation, and the town of Millfield will forever be haunted by the specter of doubt and the eerie echoes of a ghostly "help me" that still resonate through its streets on quiet, moonlit nights. Several theories suggested that he was experiencing a psychotic break, or perhaps even a form of disassociation, as a way to cope with the grief and trauma of losing his wife, while others believed that he was able to tap into the mind of the killer Ronnie Holt, due to his deep love and connection with Emily. The debate continues to this day, with no definitive answer to be found, leaving the town of Millfield to grapple with the unsettling reality that sometimes the line between the real and the imagined is blurrier than we would like to admit. Research into the paranormal and the psychological aspects of the case have been conducted by various experts, including psychologists and paranormal investigators, who have presented a range of hypotheses and explanations, from mass hysteria to collective trauma, manifesting as a shared delusion, to the possibility of a genuine haunting or psychic phenomena. The case of Emily Thompson's murder, and there were other cases where people experienced similar events, have become a subject of fascination and study for those seeking to understand the complexities of the human psyche. Anything is possible when somebody puts their mind to it, and the unexplained phenomena that can arise from it. Daniel's channeling of Emily and her voice, and his communication with her spirit, remain unexplained and controversial, with skeptics pointing to the lack of empirical evidence to support such claims and proponents arguing for the existence of a dimension beyond our own understanding. The case of Emily Thompson's murder serves as a stark reminder of the depths to which human emotion can drive us, and the mysteries that still lie shrouded in the shadows of our world. Ronnie Holt died in 2020 from a heart attack and stroke, but one thing was shocking about his death. His face looked like he saw a ghost, and it would be later ruled out. He died from an extreme case of fear, and his final words were "She is here," written on the wall of his prison cell, which added more fuel to the fire of the supernatural theories, leaving the town of Millfield to continue to ponder the enigma that is the human condition and the unsolved mystery that will forever be part of their town's lore. I don't care what people say. There's nothing wrong with loving yourself. My mirror showed me the best version of myself. Then, it destroyed my life. People pretend humility is attractive, but deep down, they want confidence. They need someone to admire. I built my brand on that. Looking good, feeling good, being better. But the truth? I hovered just below the real influencers, the ones who got high-end PR packages, who were invited to Fashion Week, who never had to chase a viral moment, because the moment always seemed to find them. I wasn't at the top, not yet. For me, growth was work, strategic hashtags, posting at peak times, buying engagement pods, especially with Natalie. And no matter what I did, I was always playing catch-up. She had 560k followers, brand deals with every luxury skincare brand, and a face that just looked expensive. Her selfies were always perfectly lit, her captions effortlessly relatable. That was the worst part, and she didn't try. I spent years clawing my way up to 45,000 followers, struggling for engagement, curating everything, while she made a pouty face at brunch and got 80,000 likes in 10 minutes. Then, last month, she DM'd me. "You're still doing this, Amanda. You work so hard for so little. Have you considered just chilling?" I stared at my screen, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. I needed something big, something that would push me ahead. She wasn't even trying to be mean. That's what made it worse. And then, I found the mirror. Getting evicted should have been stressful. But honestly, it was a blessing. My old place was a shithole. It looked expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, but the appliances barely worked, and the lighting, horrific for selfies. The new apartment was perfect. Brand new, bigger, a real influencer aesthetic. High ceilings, sleek finishes, everything bright and clean and modern. And the walk-in wardrobe. Then I saw the mirror. It was massive, an entire room just for my clothes and skincare. I barely noticed the furniture when I first stepped in, just the space, the potential. I could have cried. It was already there, set against the far wall. It looked expensive, the kind of thing you'd find in a palace. Tall, antique, framed in thick gold, curling at the edges like ivy. The glass was smooth and pristine, so clear it almost shimmered like water. I figured the last tenant must have left it behind, or maybe the apartment complex had staged it there. Either way, it was gorgeous, and when I stepped in front of it, I looked flawless. The lighting hit me just right, like some divine force was highlighting my best features. My cheekbones sharper, my lips fuller, my waist more defined. I snapped a selfie, then another, then 50 more, and when I posted them, they blew up. At first, it was magic. The moment that first selfie went up, my numbers exploded. 15,000 likes in an hour, 100 DMs, Natalie commenting, PR brands suddenly noticing me. My notifications wouldn't stop. OMG, you look insane. Your face is giving supermodel RN. Drop the skincare routine queen. Literally a goddess. Every post I made soared. My follow account climbed 50K, then 80K, then 102K. Every morning I'd wake up, sip my collagen matcha, and admire myself in the mirror. I looked perfect. But then, things started feeling off. It started small. A flicker in the reflection, like my image was lagging behind me. I laughed it off. Glitches happen, right? But then it started smiling when I wasn't. Just for a second, a quick, too wide grin that disappeared the moment I moved. I told myself I was imagining things. Not in the mirror. No, there. I still looked perfect. It was everywhere else. But then I started looking different. Natalie started getting more engagement again. She'd post something casual, morning glow #no makeup, and get 120,000 likes in 20 minutes. Meanwhile, my numbers started slipping. First, my engagement dropped. My likes halved, then halved again. Are you okay? The comments changed. You look tired. Girl, something is off. Wait, is this filter or... I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling. I rushed to the mirror. What the fuck were they talking about? I looked fine. No, better than fine. My reflection was still flawless. But then I saw it. I wasn't. A flicker. My mirrored self was still smiling. My hair looked dull now. My lips thinner. My jawline softening. I started checking the mirror constantly. The rest of my life fell away. DMs unanswered, deals ignored. I barely left my apartment. I spent hours in the wardrobe studying myself. And then, one night, when I was standing there staring, I heard it. I tried every product. Serums, exfoliants, ice baths. Nothing helped. A whisper. Guggly. I staggered back, my breath ragged. The mirror was silent. The last time I posted, I needed reassurance. But the word was still inside me. I needed them to tell me I was still beautiful. I really don't know what my wife is. Hello everyone. I was asked to follow up on what's been going on in my life. I apologize for cutting things off at random the last time. I didn't anticipate her returning home from the prosecutor's office so early. I can't let her find out. I'm writing this, or I'll end up in the basement. As I previously stated, I have been dropping small seeds so that you can completely understand my situation. If I told you everything at once, no one would believe me. She'd find out, and I'd become yet another missing person. People need to know what's going on, and why my wife is to blame. If you asked me what she was, it'd probably say a variety of things, some of which would be in a foreign language that has been forgotten over time, and is too dangerous for you to repeat. In actuality, I have no idea who or what she is. At least, I am unable to comprehend it. It gives me a headache if I think about it too much, so I try not to. All I can do is share what I saw or experienced. You will have to make your own judgment. Snow angels. You have no idea how much I detest snow. It is a complete annoyance to me as a working adult. I don't get delayed openings or snow days. I get a warning for arriving late. Perhaps I simply despise my fucking job. My mind is racing with ideas of changing departments or finding a new career as I dig my car out from under the white cover. Something in the snow catches my attention as I work to remove the ice off my windshield. Footsteps. A line of them heading directly into our property. The only item in my backyard is my shed, which will not see any human interaction until spring. I followed the tracks behind my house. The human-sized footprints appear to be dispersed haphazardly across my yard. Last night, the snow only began to fall at about 8 p.m., and it wasn't until about 11 p.m. that it began to accumulate. This individual must have spent hours wandering around in the snow in my backyard. It would be an understatement to say it was eerie. The prints also ranged in size, from as small as a baby's feet to as large as a 6-foot male. The fact that the individual was also barefoot was quite unsettling. I glanced to the window overlooking the backyard from our bedroom. The tracks left just beneath the window caused my eyes to widen. As though they had disappeared, the tracks blend into the woods. A gentle drip-drop drew my attention, dripping slowly but steadily. Rain? But after a winter storm like that, it couldn't be. Perhaps the snow is melting. Given how cold and overcast the weather is right now, it couldn't be. I felt my heart sink when I looked up into the trees. I left without verifying my observations. I simply ran, or rather sprinted, back to my house quicker than I had ever done before. I hurried inside and didn't pause to respond to my wife's sleepy questions before calling the police. I walked up to my window and gazed up at the green of the treetops blanketed in snow. Among the branches, I could still make out the shadowy black shapes of their bent bodies. I approached the window cautiously, keeping my eyes on the footsteps as though I were approaching an animal from behind. I entered the tracks. The footprints dwarf my size 11 boots. The footprints had a slight snow cover. I could practically see the grass. This individual, whomever it was, had been standing here for quite some time. It appears that I should get some security cameras. In the labyrinth of footsteps in my backyard, I could see a trail of footprints headed towards the woods. Curiosity killed more than just a cat, as I found myself following the tracks into the cold woodland. A snowstorm has left the forest rather calm. Most animals are sheltering in their dens, concentrating on staying warm. Animals who missed the chance to eat the day before the storm would have to scrounge around the winter wonderland for food that is either stowed away in their warm houses or too buried to find. After I got off the phone with the police, I told my wife what I had discovered in the woods. I could barely keep my breakfast down as I recounted what had transpired from the start. My mind is reliving the graphic scene. Sophia's frown widened as I progressed through the story. It was not a look of terror or disgust, but rather displeasure, like a child caught toying with something that they weren't supposed to. "Why did you have to call the police?" she muttered with annoyance. "Why the hell would I not?" I couldn't be more confused. "What?" I questioned. She sucked her teeth and rolled her eyes. "You know how I feel having cops crawling all over the neighborhood. They did the same thing with our neighbors. It turns into a whole big mess that ends up with media breathing down my neck. They're going to be asking what we're doing to catch the Benny Park slashers." That's what they're calling them now. Everyone thinks they're the reason behind the murders and disappearances. As far as I'm concerned, another town fairy tale, and more headaches in the form of ignorant emails and letters from the residents. Is she more worried about tabloid rumors than the 2 corpses that aren't even 500 feet away from our home? I couldn't believe it was her biggest concern. I assumed she was making a cruel joke, and I watched for a smirk, but she stayed frowning. A knock on our front door signaled the arrival of the cops. With a wave, I left the room. "Well, sorry for disturbing your peace, Princess," I called back, sarcastically. "It won't happen again," she quietly responded. She thought I couldn't hear her. I promised myself that I would never again venture into those woods. The cops asked more questions than I had answers to. They too were perplexed by the various sized footprints in my property. Crime scene cleanup filled white bins and bags with the scraps of what they could salvage from the trees. Yes, I meant to use the word scraps, since I saw what those guys in hazmat suits were putting in the white totes. Their bodies resembled the discarded skin of a newly peeled potato. New puppy. Is that barking? I looked up from my plate, confused. So, we got a puppy. Roscoe, a chocolate lab, was a voracious little demon. If you allowed him, that thing would devour the couch. It was me who even proposed it. I promised it would breathe new life into our home, as we had no intentions for a baby anytime soon. Sophia initially resisted. Almost every time I brought it up, she shut me down. We were eating dinner when I received the surprise. My wife's face was creased with a teasing smirk. At first she twisted more spaghetti around her fork, ignoring my question. Her gray eyes met my brown ones, and she couldn't help but giggle. "Well, aren't you going to go investigate it, Mr. Man of the house?" She smiles. The barking emanated from the restroom. I cautiously twisted the knob and was welcomed with playful yaps from a small brown dot of fur. Dropping to my knees, I gathered the little guy in my arms. His tongue attacked me, licking everything in its path. "What the heck, Sophia? Why didn't you tell me you got a dog?" I confront, slowly rocking the puppy. "You're the cutest thing on this planet," I told him as I walked back to the kitchen. My wife was still seated at the table, enjoying her Italian dinner. I stood in front of her, puppy in my arms. "Of course not. I just thought you didn't want a pet." Something tells me you're not actually mad." "Well, I damn near changed my mind when I brought him home, and that little bastard kept growling and barking at me." Sophia rolls her eyes. "You're unbelievable," she snorts. "What should we name him?" I gasp at my wife before pulling the puppy closer to my chest. "She didn't mean that, little guy. I'm sure your daddy and mommy have a very beautiful marriage." "Money burner," she scoffs. "You should have seen how much he was." Our third housemate, Roscoe, was, to put it mildly, a pain in the ass. He would urinate everywhere. I mean everywhere. So we couldn't leave him alone for even 10 minutes. I placed him in a large kennel to at least confine his frequent pee breaks to one area. It was probably a severe case of separation anxiety, according to the veterinarian, which is the worst case scenario for 2 full-time employed adults. Tempting, but I think Roscoe would fit him better. Roscoe had twice as many advantages as disadvantages, so I wasn't ready to give up on him. Okay, so that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I can't deny that he was a complete joy. I think he helped me get over some of my childhood traumas. Every opportunity I had, I played with him. The fact that he enjoyed being outside in the snow is a little odd for a lab, but I'm sure he was sick of spending all day in a box. In fact, he only engages in playful behavior when he's outside, so I made sure to take him on plenty of walks. I ended up hiring a dog sitter after we returned from shopping and discovered Roscoe bleeding from his mouth. He required multiple stitches after attempting to gnaw through the bars of his kennel. Seeing my beloved pet lying in a pool of his own blood made my heart stop. To be honest, Roscoe and my wife weren't as excited to be together. They'd butt heads like cats and dogs. I tried numerous times to get them acquainted. Roscoe would merely bark himself to death if my wife even tried to touch him. He snapped at her fingers as if she were poisonous. I thought I'd give them a few days, but things just got worse. He couldn't even be in the same room with her. And if my wife arrived home before me, he would litter his box with bodily waste. They'd be covered in poop and barking uncontrollably when I got home. On the bright side, I became more adept at giving him a bath. "Hey, Mr. Bowden, I wasn't going to ask this, but my mom insisted." I raised an eyebrow. "What's up, Emily?" "And please call me Jack." Roscoe was much less nervous, and things appeared to settle down considerably. I recall a discussion with the dog sitter on the second day that made me uneasy. Haint Hill. The following you are about to read is a direct transcription, typos and all, of a journal written by Father Thomas McKerney. Based on my limited research, McKerney was a priest from a Catholic church in Baldwin County, Georgia, and was rarely known to document much of anything for the church. Supposedly, when he did, it was strictly to provide written summaries of clerical events, major ceremonies, etc. However, this fact is not what makes the following account of particular interest. Over the course of a fortnight, the priest had detailed multiple visits to a rural farmhouse on the outskirts of Milledgeville, Georgia. McKerney had been invited by the owners of the property, Mr. and Mrs. X, who claimed to be experiencing bizarre household disturbances. October 18, 1979. McKerney's journaling brings to light a disturbing story. I recognized Mr. X from Mass. Today, I was summoned to a spacious country estate by a Mr. and Mrs. X, confidentiality pending. I am writing this account strictly for the purpose of church documentation. Both of them had come to Father Karen and I to discuss religious action on alleged paranormal disturbances that have caused them significant worry for the safety of their family. The estate was promptly, and rather ironically, named Haint Hill by the couple. They claim to have partaken in several attempts to cease the activity. Incense burning, prayer, Methodist blessings. Mrs. X is a Methodist, seances, and spiritualist analyses. The entire building looked oddly historical, brick base and wooden paneling. The X's maintain that the disturbances have persisted. When I first arrived at the house, I entered through the back door per their instructions. The house, white, 2 stories, large, green roof, a screen porch in the front, was a typical early 1900s, late 1800s farmhouse. The disturbances described by the X's detail as the following. Photograph attached. The family consists of Mr. X, the husband Mrs. X, the wife Jane, the young daughter, and John, the teenage son. Apparitions, which had supposedly been a common occurrence since the house's purchase in 1975. Objects moving on their own accord, more specifically, books being thrown at people. Rappings in the walls from an unknown source, shouting voices in the night, and mucus-like substances seeping from the walls. Unusual smells, like burnt hair. No further disturbances have been detailed by the family. I entered the house and blessed each room. Nothing particularly unusual happened during my visit. The family insisted that I stay for dinner. October 20th, 1979. I politely declined. After a long period of waiting at the excess insistence, I saw a cookbook fly from the dining room table before my eyes. I prudently investigated the area for strings or any other source of puppeteered movement. I found nothing to indicate a hoax. I was called back to the X residence again. Complaints of the disturbances had supposedly gotten worse. The family invited me in. The kids had locked themselves in their rooms per their parents' instructions. The couple, Mrs. X especially, insisted that I stay in the dining room. She did not initially explain to me why. I investigated my grandfather's death and found family secrets that live inside me. My grandpa died last week. He wasn't physically in my life very much, but he was supportive from a distance. He never attended my high school games, and he wasn't even there for my college graduation. But he always managed to call. He would remind me of how much he missed me, and would regale me in his adventures for the week. He was an active man, retired, but living at the edge of the world and thrived off the land. He even built his own house out there in that little town far away from me and everyone else. He was so happy to tell me when he finished it. He even sent me the blueprints, and I got to design my own room for when I could come and visit. He lived at the edge of the world, loved me, and never struggled to survive, which is why I couldn't accept his sudden death. They said he did it to himself. No, I didn't accept it at all. I still don't. He wanted to show me his home. He wanted me there. He wanted to live, and I had to know why. Someone wanted him dead. He left me the home he built in his will, and that's where I went. It was more beautiful in person than the pictures he sent. The house he built at the edge of the world was a thing of quiet grandeur. It loomed at the top of a winding dirt road where the land crumbles into rocky cliffs and the sea beyond stretches into an endless gray horizon. Built by my grandfather's hands, it was meant to be a legacy. The air around it smelled faintly of salt and something else, like fresh dirt and dewy grass. The wooden frame, though solid, seemed to sigh when the wind passed through its eaves, as if exhaling after holding its breath too long. The tall and narrow windows let in just enough light to feel unsettling, their glass warped ever so slightly, so that the world outside always looked a little off. They were thin too, and allowed in the delicate noise of crashing waves at the cliffside below. Inside, the floors creaked in places where no one stepped. The wallpaper, once rich with intricate patterns, had begun to peel in long curling strips. My grandpa's study was locked, yet some nights when the house was at its stillest, I could swear I heard the faint rustling of pages, as if someone were turning them slowly, deliberately. I was only there a few days, and there were already some things that bothered me deeply. The townspeople never spoke of the house, not directly. Their glances lingered too long when they saw me coming, and their smiles always seemed a little forced, like they knew something I didn't. When I mentioned where my grandpa lived, the conversation would shift, subtle but noticeably uncomfortable. At night, the wind pressed against the walls, whispering through the cracks. I told myself it was nothing, just the house settling, just the wind. But sometimes, when I laid awake in the dark, I felt something else, something listening, watching, waiting. The first place to look was the study. I had a gut feeling that room was important. It was the room where my grandpa spent all his time. Anything of value would be in there. I just had to find the key. And after sweeping through the entire house, I came up empty-handed. The fruitless search was infuriating. Late at night, I was pouring myself a glass of whiskey from the decanter in the kitchen, debating whether a boot through that door would bring me enough catharsis or an axe would. It was pouring rain outside. Crashes of thunder rattled those thin windows, and the calm sounds of the sea couldn't be heard, just the turbulent storms of weather in mind. I looked up and saw it, the attic hatch. The attic was mostly barren, with some small furniture or memorabilia covered in sheets. The thing that caught my eye, though, was a framed photograph. It was a picture of me and my grandpa. It was faded, and it stood on top of a pile of boxes facing the hatch. It was the only photo of him I saw in that house, and it had me in it too. Immediately, I knew he wanted me to find it. Seeing the thing brought some tears to my eyes, but when I started back down the hatch, I dropped it. The frame shattered on the floor. I cursed and jumped down to ensure the photo itself was all right. But there was something else in that frame, a key and a message. It was a handwritten note on the back of our picture. Secrets kept safe until the truth must be known. I was thrilled, and yet somewhat uneasy. My grandpa knew I would be the one to figure out his mysterious death. He trusted me to catch his killer. It was starting to unravel, the very first clue he left behind, and I scrambled to his study. The room was filled to the brim with books. Dust motes swirled among the flashing pale light of thunder. Journals filled every shelf. Abstract art and symbols were painted on large pages, pinned to walls. In the middle of the room was his desk, and there laid a thick and heavy diary. The diary was filled with my grandpa's daily life. Among his journals, though, were references to meetings with his friends. I didn't know my grandpa had any. In the pages where his friends had been mentioned were the same patterns he painted and pinned to the walls. They were intricate, beautiful, and of dihedral symmetry. Like unnatural snowflakes fell on the pages, and were enlarged to show every detail they contained. The last few pages were of my most concern, though. They had to contain something to point me in the right direction regarding his death. And they did. He said a secret meeting was held at the edge of the world, something to do with an awakening, or a revival, and someone called Thilkor. It was the day he died, and I knew that these friends had something to do with it. These people he was investigating in this little town so far away from civilization, they killed him. I went to bed that night with more questions than I ever had, but that photograph was constantly invading my consciousness. I didn't remember it. It looked like I was about 5 years old, and he was crouching over me with his hand on my head, roughing up my hair. He was wearing a blue-collared button-down and khakis. He was also wearing his favorite watch. It's one of the only things I remember about him. He wore that silver thing every day, never leaving the house without it. I had a huge grin on my face. Then my mother's words came to me. Your grandpa can stay, sweetie. He has important work to do. You can only visit him when you're older. You'll understand. I never did. I still don't. I fell asleep that night, unnerved. That aching feeling someone was watching me crept up again, and so I left all the lights on, blinds closed. I could have sworn I saw movement outside, just beyond the tree line. The town at the end of the world is a place where moisture thrives. It flows in from the ocean in the west, and from the forest in the east. Dew drips off of every surface, and thick fog permeates the air every morning. This means most things in the town are made of wood. Any bare metal exposed to the elements can't stand the moisture, and turns to rust. The town hall, post office, civic center, all fresh, unpainted, wood. I went on a walk that day through town to clear my mind, and for groceries. The mixture of booze and family secrets doesn't sit well in the mind or body, so I prescribed myself a calm walk through town to dissect my thoughts and find answers. Who are these friends? How can I find them? How could I find proof they killed him? Am I jumping to conclusions here? I debated myself until I noticed something strange. A man following me. He trailed not too far behind. He seemed nervous, fidgety. His head hunkered low and he wore a hoodie that covered most of his face. He was talking to himself. My suspicions turned to paranoia. I noticed him from further up the hill close to my grandpa's house. He had been behind me ever since. I decided to turn right. He followed. I turned right again. He was behind me, one last time. Still there, definitely following. I turned down an alley and started to sprint. I made it 4 steps before I got pinned to the wall. He threw me against it with unnatural force. It knocked the wind out of me, and before I could scream, he covered my mouth and held my throat. "Listen, girl, you shouldn't have looked," he said in a rushed whisper. He darted his head, looking down the alley before he spoke again. "But now you have to know. Find the place where the dead speak." He let go of me and ran away. I rubbed my sore throat and thought if it would bruise, but also, was that a friend? He seemed desperate. I had a feeling that was the only way he could help me, even if it was a trap. I had to get answers, and I knew exactly where to go. While walking to the cemetery, my senses were dialed to 11. The sudden attack left me scared, and I was suspicious of everyone at that point. People looked at me from across the street, hands held to their faces, whispering and staring. I walked faster. The closer I got to the cemetery, the more I noticed them. Symbols. The same ones drawn in my grandpa's study were carved into trees, drawn in the dirt, marking graves. The sun was setting, and I noticed a puddle of blood glimmering in orange glow. A fresh corpse laid over a stone, the body carved and twisted into a snowflake. It was my grandpa. I sobbed over his corpse. The loss was paralyzing. I squeezed his crooked hands and cried over his smashed body, covered in blood. My tears ran dry. The reality, no, the finality of his death made me come to my senses. He was supposed to be dead a while ago. Those friends aren't just some people, but everyone that lives at the edge of the world. His body must have been laying there all day, and no one came. All the strange looks, the crooked smiles, the half answers. The whole town killed him. I was in over my head. I had to leave. I ran to his house as fast as I could. The hill to the house was covered in those symbols. They were carved into the ground while I was away, and littered every inch of hillside. A voice called to me from the tree line beyond the snowflakes on the ground. It was the same man as before. "You're too late," he shouted. "It's already done. Don't go." He ducked behind some branches and fled. I grimaced and turned back toward the house. I packed my things and combed through the study. The first thing I grabbed was my grandpa's diary, but noticed a jewelry case sitting on a shelf beside the door. I opened it to find my grandpa's watch. It was the first time I was ever able to get my hands on it, and I definitely had to keep it. When I turned the face over, though, something shocked me. A snowflake etched into the back of it. The same watch he had for all those years since my childhood. Before I could even think, I heard a knock at the door. I jolted up and slightly pulled the curtains from a window to peek outside. It was already dark out, but something was glowing just outside my scope of vision. Something that casted a flickering orange light on the trees. A fire, and something else. People. Lots of people. I ran down the hall and looked through my bedroom window. The whole house was surrounded. They stood outside, hand in hand, and sang. That's when I realized I didn't lock the front door. I heard from behind me, "The debt has been paid." They hit me over the head, and I fell unconscious. I woke up tied to the dining room chair. Blood was crusting over my left eye, forcing it shut. My body was sore. I looked down to see myself dressed in a white gown. No shoes. People were everywhere inside my home, dousing it in what smelled like gasoline. A large man stood before me. He was a fortress, thick, with muscle and fat. He was naked and had a rabid look in his eyes. He stepped toward me, slow and methodical, smiling like a kid on Christmas morning. "Your grandpa never told you, did he, just how important you are?" he said, caressing my cheek. In a rage, I tried to bite his hand. "You sick fucks killed him." He seemed shocked I would even say that. "No, my dear. He did this to himself. He did it for you, for all of us." He reached over to the dining room table and picked up a dark mass. It was a grotesque thing, twisted and alive in ways metal should not be. Jagged spires of blackened bone jutted upward, slick with something that gleamed like oil. Dark veins pulsed along its surface, writhing as though the ring itself breathed. It was big enough to fit over my head, and that's where he placed it. It dug into my flesh and I cried out in pain. "Our savior arrives," he said. The people began to undress at my front door, leaving a pile of their clothes in the foyer. Men, women, children. After the last one left, they threw a match onto the pile. My grandpa's home was suddenly up in flames. The fire blazed around me, the smoke choking every breath I took. But I wasn't done yet. The ropes that bound me to the chair burned away by the heat, or my own frantic desperation was able to unravel the knots. But the crown still sat heavy on my head. No matter the force I used to pry it off my head, it never budged. I had to escape. I had to fight. The demon had already started to rise. I could feel its presence, a malevolent shadow creeping along my spine, crawling under my skin. It was glued to the ceiling now, a black humanoid figure. It looked like a burned man, skin sloughing off its crooked form, spilling at my feet. I tried to stand, but my legs shook beneath me. The fire's heat and presence of the demon made it almost impossible to focus. It pounced on me. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, trying to push it back, but it was too powerful. It wanted in. It wanted me. I felt it, a sharp, searing pain, like claws raking across my ribs, dragging up my throat. My mouth went dry, and before I could react, I tasted something foul. The air around me thickened, and I knew it was coming. The demon wasn't just going to take me. It was going to force its way in. I screamed as I felt its claws tear into my throat, its weight pushing against my chest. I punched its bony, squishy body, trying to stop it, but the force was too much. I gasped, choking on the foul, burning presence as it pressed against my lips, forcing its way into me. It was like swallowing fire, raw, twisted power, seething with anger. I tried to fight it, to pull back, but it was already inside. My body jerked violently as its essence poured into my mouth, down my throat, and into my soul. And then it was there, inside me, a storm of darkness that flooded every inch of my being, filling me with a terrible, unnatural strength. I struggled to control it. I fought to hold on to myself, but the demon was too strong, too vicious. It tore at my mind, clawed through my thoughts, demanding control. I fought back with every ounce of my will, struggling to force it back, but it was no use. It pressed harder, consuming me from the inside out. And that's when I felt it. A snap, the last vestiges of myself breaking apart. But instead of surrendering, I grinned, because somewhere in that madness, I knew what I had to do. With one last scream, I let the demon take me, but not the way it wanted, not the way it expected. I threw myself into the fire, my body a weapon as I smashed through the flames. I fought through the heat, through the pain, my mouth open wide, as I wouldn't let it try to break me. But it didn't know, it didn't understand. I would control it. When I walked out from the wreckage, the cult was there, kneeling, their faces twisted in grief. They saw what I had become, and they began to wail. And I let them see, just for a moment. I smiled, because, at that moment, I knew they had made a mistake. They thought it was taking me, but it had only made me stronger. I ran. I ran past all those people writhing in grief on the ground. I ran past their burning town. I ran until my feet bled. I ran until I was safe, until I made it home. You see, the house my grandfather built wasn't just a legacy. It was a shrine, a throne built just for me. That's it for tonight's stories, but the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.